2022 school board meeting. We're happy to have everyone here tonight, and we will take the roll call.
Sure. Tally Westerberg.
Here from SA 50. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Liz Barrett.
Here.
Pip Clues.
Here.
Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Ann Walker.
Here.
Margot Peabody.
Here.
Nancy Clayberg.
Here.
Hope Van Epps.
Here.
Brian French.
Here.
Carrie Nolte.
Here.
Kimberly McGlinchey.
Here.
Nick Dowling.
Okay, can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First item on the agenda is the acceptance of the March regular meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to accept?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
One piece on that, there was a
Yes.
couple motions missing, first and seconds. I didn't know if we wanted to go back and add those.
Look, we can go circle back.
Okay.
I don't recall them off the top of my head, but unless people here do.
Do you have it?
I think it was me and Lisa.
Okay.
All that good.
My notes later, if
All
it's
right.
fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, it's time for the public comment session. The public comment is each person has 3 minutes to speak, and Margot's going to time it for us. Please state your name and address, and are they coming up to the
Yeah,
table?
to get the
Okay.
audio, you'll have to come to the.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Monica Zingarello, 135 Thaxter Road. I am here to ask for further review of a specific policy when it comes to extracurricular and co-curricular activities as our student athletes sign specifically at Portsmouth High School. As of recent, there was an event, a house party that happened in which students were found to be at the party, outside of the party, have run from the party in their cars around the party. And there is one specific clause in this contract, as I'll say it, that is very ambiguous, and that is the clause that any student to be found in the presence of alcohol or drug use in violation of laws referenced above will be treated as a violation of this policy. The ask of this is because I know of several situations that happened at that party where students, athletes were found to be picking up other friends, never entered the home, never had alcohol. There was no intention for them to be there or had any alcohol or drug use, but they were found to be guilty because they were found to be in the presence of. When students went in front of the disciplinary board at the high school, there is no definition of what it means to be in the presence of other than to be at a drinking party. If someone is in the driveway, if someone is in the yard, if someone is in their car waiting for a friend that may need a ride home, that is considered, as we have found, to be in the presence of alcohol or a drug. That, to me, again, is very ambiguous. When asked of what is the definition, the disciplinary committee had no definition for these students and these families. So I would like to see, for the policy committee, I believe is the process, to take a further review of that clause as well as a further review of the consequences. Someone waiting for their friend in a car because they're in trouble inside the house does not warrant the same consequence as somebody that has been inside drinking. And everyone that has been deemed in this category has received the same consequence of a 3, 4, 5 game suspension. So that is, again, that is the ask, to be able to look at that clause, provide a clear definition and parameters of what it means to be in the presence, as well as the maybe perhaps different levels of consequence for having deemed to have been drinking, to not been drinking, to not have been in the house, etc. So, thank you.
Can you just,
Sure.
cite the
Wait,
qual-
stop. We can't do that. We can't ask questions during public comment.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, she's commenting on the policy. We want to know what the policy is.
Well, we know what the policy is.
Okay.
We know what the policy is.
So you're aware. Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yep.
Second technical glitch. I'm ready.
Would you like to speak?
Sure, not really, but I will. I wasn't planning on it, and anyway. So, Kate Beland, 373 Union Street. And I just had the opportunity to show up and thought I would, just to be a voice for, I know a lot of parents that are concerned and don't really understand that policy like I know myself. I didn't even really know the previous events of what had occurred, that why we're discussing this now, but I would tell one of my kids, oh, someone needs a ride, yes, go pick that person up, or that teammate needs to get picked up and be brought home, please do. Like, that's how we treat things in our family. So I guess I would like to know more on the policy, and I do think it should be visited anyway. I understand, as a student athlete and the other extracurriculars that have to sign it, I understand, you put yourself in this situation, it's pretty black and white, you chose to drink, you got caught, that's a punishment. But I think certainly it's a more gray if someone is maybe trying to do something to help someone, and they are not guilty in that same category, if that makes sense. That's all. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Zoom audience.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
We have someone from our Zoom audience.
If anyone in the Zoom audience would like to address the board, please raise your virtual hand. I see. First, we have Shelley Saunders. One sec. Go ahead, Shelley.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, okay. I wanted to call in tonight to support these two wonderful student athlete moms, Monica and Kate, because I do support what they're trying to do and rewording this student athlete clause regarding alcohol and drug use. According to the clause right now, the wording is an athlete has to be in the presence of alcohol to be punished. And as I was reading it, I was like, okay, there's got to be something else. There's got to be another clause. There's going to be something underneath. But no, the wording is in the presence of alcohol. And what I will tell you is all of you in this room were probably born in the presence of alcohol. Champagne, congratulations. All of you will probably die in the presence of alcohol. Congratulations, champagne. We are always in the presence of alcohol. As these moms take these student athletes to shop in Market Basket, we are in the presence of alcohol. I have no idea who instructed the principal to put the word presence into this clause in 2018. As I've heard, this is when it went in. Legally, she was not advised well. And this wording is so broad and legally not legal that I hope you act very quickly on this clause, because I don't think any of us knew that this wording was there. If we knew, we would have said, hey, this is not right. This doesn't seem right. Me, as being a mother of a daughter who plays 2 sports, per year, yeah, this is not right. In the presence of alcohol, this is so insane. So I urge you to push this through to the policy committee and get this fixed and fix the damage that it's done retroactively to these students this past year at least, because this is out of control. I mean, this is like a walking lawsuit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the Zoom audience? Anyone else? Seeing none, we can move on. Thank you. Close the public.
Okay. Should we address this, or do you want to?
You can refer to the policy
Okay.
committee.
We will refer this to the policy committee and ask them to review the policy. Yes,
I do
Elizabeth.
have a question. I just,
I guess for the board's perspective, I just want to be sure that there's due process here, meaning that if these kids are in front of a disciplinary committee, that they are advised of whatever rights in case this policy is ambiguous. And I guess, the folks have talking about the definition of in presence of, I guess I'm more concerned about where are we getting our facts from? Are we relying on police reports for in the presence of, or word of mouth? So I guess I am a little bit concerned from what I've heard, and I just want to be sure that there is due process here so that we as a board do not see a bigger issue legally.
Elizabeth, we've been dealing with this for many, many years.
Okay.
There is always due process.
Okay.
Our policy committee adopted this policy 3 years ago, and I know Ian was on the policy committee at the time. It was a huge committee made up of parents, students, teachers. It was a huge effort to refine this policy, and that's what we have today. We can re-examine that particular sentence if people think we should do that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to change.
I guess that's not what I mean by due process. I mean that if they're going in front of a disciplinary board, I want to be sure that they know their rights, and if there is a disagreement or a dispute with how things were handled at the high school, that it's very clear to these parents what their rights are as far as any sort of appeal or anything like that. And that's all I'll throw out there, is I just want to be sure from a due process standpoint, not about the language of this, but the process that's in front of each of these parents and kids today. Thank you.
It's a system we've used for many, many years. So, Margot.
So can I make a more clear motion?
Well, I don't know if we need a motion. We're just going to refer it to the policy committee to review that particular, to review that particular part of the policy.
But I think it needs more.
Expand it to the other policies that also touch on alcohol and drugs, because they kind of crosstalk in a way. And I think if we're going to look at it, we might want to look at all of them. I mean, not to say for sure whether it needs to change, but that if we're going to change one piece, we should make sure that we're looking at
Lockstep.
all the pieces.
Okay, well, we can look at the entire policy.
Okay, thanks.
If the policy committee will do that.
So that's policies JICDD and IGD, both are being
Can you
referred back
repeat
to.
that, please?
JICDD and IGD will get referred back to the policy committee for revision and possibility of improvement. Because what I feel I'm hearing is there is not an appeal process listed in the policy. And the policy committee needs to look at that and see, does the appeal process, where's the place for it, and how does that make sure that each individual case is handled individually and not a lump response, is what I'm
I don't
hearing.
believe they're ever handled in a lump response, are they?
Each discipline committee is a separate hearing.
Separate hearing.
We can
Okay.
look at that.
Kerry?
I'd ask the policy committee as they reconsider this to go one step further on the punishment of removal from sports as a factor. As we know from substance use, belonging in sports and athletics is really a preventative piece to preventing long-term substance abuse. And so to ruin someone's chances of college athletics or things like that from that sort of punishment, I know that this is more dated, like this was the norm for a long time, but I think there's some emerging evidence that it's probably a thing of the past that this gives us an opportunity to look broader at.
Hope.
So I would just echo that beyond sports to Honor Society. I mean, this has come up before I was even a board member. I'm sure you know that, Nancy. But I would ask the policy committee to take a look at what was our goal in establishing this policy. Our policies around discipline, I feel as a parent, are very harsh and very punitive versus, really encouraging our students and rewarding the students that are doing the right thing and making the right decisions. So I think we have to really look at what is the goal at some of these policies that we're trying to establish, and then really look at what is the long-term impact. You can think that you're simply just punishing a child from a week of sports or removing their name from Honor Society, but that has lasting impacts to students. in their college applications and so forth. So I think we need to take a deeper
We're not going to get into a discussion
dive.
about this now. It has to go to the policy committee, and that's where the discussion will be. When they bring it back to us, then we'll discuss it, okay? So we gave an assignment to the policy committee, and they're going to do their work, okay? So we're going to move on. Next item on the agenda is special presentations.
We have with us our Performing Arts Coordinator, Steve Cirillo, to give you the updates and highlights, all things performing arts.
Welcome.
You.
No, it's welcome. What I mean welcome is it's so cool to be here and see two of my former saxophone students sitting on the school board. Even one member of my World Championship percussion ensemble back in 2003. Right? So as I enter finish up year 34 in Portsmouth, I have a lot to report. But I thought I would just start in March 2020 because I did present, I think it was November of 2019. I think Patrick Ellis had me come in, and so here's where we are. March 20th, the pandemic hits, we send everybody home. We transitioned to the remote world for Zoom. But for the performing arts classes, things were canceled, and we kind of became secondary. And not on purpose, but, we were all trying to make this transition, and, we're groups, we perform, and that transition to Zoom was really devastating on a lot of levels. But it didn't mean we didn't exist, okay? So just like everyone else struggling to keep our kids engaged, we all were going through it. Every teacher, every team, any event, everything for PHS. We were a day or two away from opening middle school Frozen. I mean, literally, we were going to bring them in and shoot a video, but I mean, those kids never saw that stage, that video. We didn't even get a video of that, and the work was done. So there were so many disappointments. PHS Band was 6 weeks away from going to Disney in Florida. 6 weeks away. $170,000 raised and paid for. Great news. We got every penny back. Every single penny. Every single kid was refunded. Okay, just so you know. The Great East Festivals for the middle school, nothing happened. And every play, concert was canceled. We did have a couple of incredible bright moments where, for us, it was PHS graduation. And all of a sudden, thank God we have Eric Gagnon. He put together a couple of videos with Olin Johannesson, and we had virtual performances like we actually had them playing simultaneously while graduation was going. It was like we were so overjoyed, like we were in tears. I mean, like we had something to show for. We were worried about those seniors. And then the summer came. And of course, what we found out in the summer of 2020 is, well, the performing arts are the super spreaders. You can't sing or play your instruments because that's the bad and everything. Just don't do it. So we got creative. What were sports people doing? Well, you could have 6 kids socially distanced out on the field. We did the same. We did the same for band. There was no band camp. Well, we had something, but we brought 8 band kids in at a time with one teacher. I think that was the ratio we were told. Band camp lasted forever. We never got to put the kids together. I mean, but we engaged the kids that summer. They were outside. I mean, it was a beautiful summer. The band field never looked so good. It was the first year we didn't have mud. It was just, and we weren't marching on that field. So it was a social distance kind of summer, but there was hope. Okay, we had some hope. We had the kids. We got to the fall. We could play outside. The weather was spectacular. November 1st, I think we had a family day. The band spread out all over the stadium field, socially distanced every 5 yards, and all the parents came and sat socially distanced. We got a performance, and it was like, oh my goodness, there were some of those things, but it took so much energy and so much effort. We were there for Russ Wilson's ceremony down at Leary Field, just to be there for our kids. And again, it was all about Zoom, but all of a sudden it's Veterans Day and it's cold. You can't play outside anymore. The Holiday Ensemble took some risks. Yep, we stood outside some windows and played at some homes, socially distanced. We Zoomed to the city council. I can only fit 12 kids equally spaced in the room, and we were, you could see us in a little square. I watched it later on, you couldn't tell what we were doing, but we gave the kids an opportunity. tragic in that year was we started no 5th grade band members. We couldn't safely do that. I mean, no staff members could travel school to school. We put people in positions that, the success, wasn't their thing, but everybody dug in and everyone worked together to provide opportunities for these kids. Then we started to think outside the box. Abby Keller is like, I love her to death. Like, let's do something outside. So for senior week, we did a movie thing down at the P's, and they called me about doing some sound. Well, Abby Keller's like, let's do an outside drive-in. So we did an outside drive-in where everyone at Don Darrow drove to the high school. Prescott Park brought in their big screen. Jordan Lampert provided some sound, and it was like probably the hit of the Singing Holiday Ensemble. Played a few carols, but Kate Callahan sent me a message. This was so awesome. They needed this. We served hot chocolate, walked car to car. People didn't get out of their cars. So we were thinking outside the box because it's really giving the kids the opportunities. And so thinking that way through, Alden Cable, no fall musical, what are we going to do? We got to do something. We did a virtual MTCA festival. We had the giant blow-up screen in the auditorium, socially distanced. We performed while judges clinicked us from California, 3-hour difference. Well, they were doing it live in California, so at 1 in the morning when we're done here in the East Coast, but we were very successful. So whatever we could do to give our kids, something to do, we did it, but it did shut down the band. Eric was so frustrated, and Olin was so frustrated because we couldn't really sing. We lost our rehearsal spaces at the middle school. They had to become classrooms. We were rehearsing and, making the most of it. And again, some schools were fully remote. Some kids weren't in school. So, and the staff was doing whatever they could. Continuing on, as that went by, we had our kids that we challenged all our kids. There was all state, but it was Zoom all state. We still had kids representing us on the highest level. Well, it was a huge learning curve. The first audition, Nick Tavares, took us 3.5 hours to record one student, and we had 14 to go. So, Olin and I spent Saturday and Sunday 24/7 just to make sure these kids got in their festivals. And then they had a virtual festival in the following April, so some of our kids made it. So, Eric Cagnon delivered computers to kids' homes one by one. We changed our resources and bought more hardware. We bought instruments for the elementary music teachers so kids didn't have to share. Like, we were doing every single thing. We weren't traveling, so we were using our travel money to do whatever. All of a sudden, I became the system sound expert, and luckily I had a great experience with Bose, and we found this incredible speaker. All of a sudden, every school, every teacher wanted one, a $20 headset. We started having outside classrooms. So, that was what we were doing, thinking outside the box. But, then the spring, all of a sudden it started to turn like it's April. Everyone's back. Karen Marceau is like, let's do something outside. We had those tents. We did an outdoor recorder concert. It was like such a huge thing, trying to make sure, though, you couldn't hear the noise from the bypass, though, at New Franklin had its challenges. And then PHS, we pulled out all the stops. SpongeBob the Musical outside. It was incredible amount of work. However, it rained for 3 of those performances. We knew there was a chance. We knew it. We were dancing in the water. But we still had something. And then we got to graduation, and the PHS band, by some miracle, pulled it together and actually performed at the graduation. So there were the highlights, and we continued on. As I said, in 2020, one of the things was the staff wasn't allowed to travel school to school. We got to the next year, we're now back traveling school to school. We sort of had a band camp this past year, but the biggest impact for us was staffing. Every single part-time person, and everyone knows the story, is gone. We lost our guard instructor. We lost our sound engineer. What happened is, because of COVID, they lost their real jobs. And when they lost their real job to work for us, they were going to lose benefits that they were getting for COVID. So Some of them volunteered, but it became a hassle, and replacing those positions. Well, good news is I finally got a hit for the color guard instructor yesterday. The job's been posted since November. So we're facing the same thing. I know, I've been sweeping floors. I know the custodian shortage. We're all in the same place. So hopefully that's going to come back. We had finally this year, things started to turn around. Live auditions for Allstate, but we got to November. This next variant showed up. We were able to get in a couple of concerts. The middle school and both the high school had concerts, holiday concerts, socially distanced because we have that incredible auditorium with space. We just, brought one group in, brought another group out. We were able to collaborate with Portsmouth Symphony. We had a great that happened, and then January came, and boom, our poor All-State honors students, all 4 of them, their festival got canceled. Like, couldn't take chances. Here we are. I'm like, I was so nervous in January. Are we going down that path again? Because I was nervous because in February we're taking 33 students to California. Well, good news, we made it to California. No one got left in California. Nobody got the virus. It was kind of like we got right over that bubble. An incredibly successful trip. Can't say enough about how I felt about the team. I'm Alden and Gina. And then just last week we had our first chamber music festival in 2 years. We had grades, some people were there, grades 6 through 12. Every chorus sang with our new choral instructor. Many kids got to play solos. All the band kids were represented. Our drama kids got to pull out some of those incredible acts. 2.5 hours of music to the most. A supportive audience in the PHS cafeteria. We didn't serve any food, of course. We didn't want anyone touching anything, and that was the week we took off our masks, right? So, they were optional. And just this past weekend, the PHS Percussion Ensemble, after 2 years, finally got to go to a live competition. Finished in 2nd place down in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. And here we are. Like, it's just been an incredible struggle. So, we know that what's coming, that the bright side of this year, we didn't start any 5th graders last year, but in September, I worked with Phil Davis and the elementary teachers, and we started 6th graders. Because we didn't start 5th graders, we started over 45 beginning 6th graders with instrumental lessons. And if you know the way our system works, we share our staff. Everybody but I think 2 of our performing arts staff travel. So instead of our middle school teachers going to the elementary schools to support lessons, our elementary teachers came to the middle school, and with the end of the day flex block, we were able to recuperate some of that. So those kids missed a year, but they got to start. And knowing the concern of the elementary teachers at the beginning of the year, well, we all know I have an elementary child, and how many of them were vaccinated when we started in September. We were still nervous. So we didn't start them. The plan was to start a 2nd wave. Well, 2nd semester hit. We started over 70 5th graders. So we've started 111 instrumentalists this year. That's an incredible number. The chorus thing, again, we didn't do any choral concerts at the beginning of the year, but now, I shouldn't say that. Abby Keller did one. We did another outside screen video at the high school, and she did 2 at her school, timing perfect, day before we got 8 inches of snow. So whatever it takes, we were giving those kids the opportunities. And, it's all been about how can we deliver this instruction, how can we make the kids successful, how can we do it safely? Like, that's really, you got to put the balance. But I kind of feel like we've kind of turned the corner. There's a lot of great things coming up. We do have 4 students going to the All-State Festival. It will be live just in 2 weeks. What I think about that is, even in the pandemic, like, I have my first 4-year All-State student in my 34 years. I've met Lilia Potter Schwartz, was 4th chair violin in the state, so we're being able to deliver this instruction and challenge all the kids who are, part-time, the kids who are serious about music. That's really the mission here. So quickly, and the All-State Festival, we're planning an informants for the grade 5 band members. I think May 18th at the middle school. We're going to put them all together. So it's not going to be a performance, but we'd invite their parents. We'd bring them into the middle school after school, let them play together. Actually, that would be cool. They're all going to that school next year. Nate Wanton is going around to all the elementary schools with recruiting for chorus. And since the pandemic, since this year, now that they're singing, he has had open rehearsals. I think he's added 15 or 16 kids to the middle school choir just since January. We're getting the kids back at it. We're doing middle school is not doing a Great East Festival, but we're doing our own in-house festival where they'll come to the high school for a day. We're going to bring some adjudicators to give them the idea of feeling like a festival at the end of the day. With band and choir period being at the end, they'll get to be out with the kids and socialize with them and integrate with them. That's really where we need these connections. I mean, the biggest thing for the performing arts is we haven't been able to be together. So now that the masks are off and now that we can do these things, we're bringing our kids back together. I see us, Memorial Day events are planned both at Prescott Park and the parade. Little Harbor's planning some kind of musical review on June 8th. Plus, we have summer scholarships for our students. We'll be doing that and giving the kids things for the summer. Well, what we know is the impact the pandemic's had on us. We learned that it takes way more to do anything, right? Way more to produce an event. I know the masks are coming off and things are getting better, but the protocols are always changing. Like, we don't know. We were told when we were going with percussion there has to be a mask on it everywhere. We showed up in Massachusetts, changed all the rules. No one's wearing masks. Our kids wore masks. And I was like, I think it's, there's the option because we want to make sure kids feel safe, and that's really what it's about. The teacher burnout for us is real because it takes so long to do a production. I mean, the time, and we keep talking about, well, let's do something in the summer, let's make it up. I don't think that's realistic to think that your teacher who's worked really hard is going to now work extra hard in the summer. I know I have to work hard in the summer because there's things to get ready for the year, but they need that time to energize. So I do have a plan. I'll talk about that. And other things that have happened. You put a pandemic and then you look at some of the real changes that have happened. We changed the school day, 5 years ago. I know because I think that was great for me personally. If But what it did for us is it compressed when we can engage students. With the overlap, we used to have more time when students were in school from 7:30 to later, but when you move the middle school and elementary schools where the high school, well, I have a lot of traveling people and it's kind of tightened that schedule up a little bit. We're doing the best that we can, but when we had that longer day, that gave us more opportunities to get kids engaged. So it's not a good or a bad thing, it's just a different thing, and as I told Patrick Ellis when he asked me that 2 years ago, do you want a teacher, whatever? It's like, I don't want a teacher yet unless you move something else because we're still getting that service done. So that's something to think about. People are like, oh, the numbers in band and choir are down so much. Well, also in the last 5 years, we've implemented a drama program. And I always like to talk about the resources. Everyone thinks about the resources, it's the money funding. Well, it's not just the money. There are only so many performing arts kids in Portsmouth. So if you add another program, they're going to go to one of the performing arts programs. So think of the performing arts as you got this many performing arts kids, and you had an instrumental and vocal program. Now you have a drama program. So you've taken that pie, you've cutting it differently. So when you look at the numbers, look at all the numbers. And drama, has been my personal mission to take that from that after-school club to bring it back into a classroom engaging club, and it's an engaging curriculum, just like all our music classes, and all of our classes have to work for the National Core Arts Standards, creating, performing, responding, and connecting. And there's certain benchmarks for every single level, and we've done that. I mean, it was a gradual implementation. Backwards, we started with the high school, then added 8th grade and 7th grade and 6th grade. Alton Capel was just an extracurricular activity coach. Now he teaches drama at all levels. So continuing, like, we've had incredible support. I don't want people to think we've been left behind. I know people talk about that, but I feel like this board has done everything to give us the tools that we need to be successful financially, and the support, just even what I get to do to be able to see that. Working on huge capital improvement things. You know, if you've seen the high school play, right, you've heard that sound system. Well, I gotta like shout out to Ken Lynchy. Like, a capital improvement thing like that takes planning. It took us 3 years to get the $100,000 in to do that, and then 3 years to get it done. So it's like a long-term process. And if you've been to any of our schools, like each school, you know, there's a wonderful sound system at Don Darrow with the construction project. There's one at New Franklin. Little Harbor's on the docket. That's coming back. We kind of lost that last year, but, you know, we couldn't gather anyway. And then, you know, my next plan is to finish the middle school. So we have those things. The technology thing, you know, again, Eric Gagnon working with Tom Lott, state-of-the-art computer facilities, both the middle school and high school. So I feel it's not about money. People are like, oh, can we give you more money? So I don't think that's what we really need. And then we have our community partners like the Portsmouth Symphony, where kids can perform live. Where can you get a symphony orchestra and put your kid on a stage? At the music hall, okay? We have Portsmouth Pro Musica, another course. We have St. John's has a program at Don Darrow, but our kids are benefiting because they're getting performance opportunities there as well. And PMAC, who always provides some scholarship programs for our students in the summer. Again, our staff is doing an amazing job, and there's change in our staff. There'll be change. We're all going to evolve, you know, I know if you haven't heard, Alden Cable's leaving, but, you know, doesn't mean our program's going to, I'm sure we're going to have plenty of applicants for that position. It just means we're going to evolve in a new direction. So it's based on all the people we have and how the program's going. So I'm so thankful for what we have here in Portsmouth, and I see a real bright future for us. But I do know that it's going to take time. I've been approached about talking about some use for ESSER funds. You know, what could we do? I've been in conversation with Russ Grazier at PMAC, and one of the things we talked about was, for me, was like, I originally talked to Steve about this 2 years ago. I was like, well, could we do, you know, we didn't use some of those stipends. Well, let's use them in the summer, and, you know, we'll have us teach the lessons. But as I explained, my staff's like, it's like they can't. Like, it's like, if you ask me to do one more thing, but we want to find ways to engage those kids. So Russ Grazier, thinking just like me, he's like, look, he talked to Kim McNamara at the city. He's like, well, the city has some funds. I would like this grant. What if we brought some kids in, we ran a 2-week program, we could use your spaces, but the caveat is the kids get free lessons, but they go right into the program in the fall. So he's come up with a 4-year plan that he's talked to Kim McNamara about. But that would be, you know, when I looked at the NAFME recommendations of what schools would do for that, that would be a place to recuperate. If maybe those funds don't work out, maybe there's something there for us, and I could share Russ's plan with all of you to look at. So if there's potential for us to get some of those kids' lessons through PMAC and take the burden off our regular teachers, that would be a great thing. So that's where I think we are. I think we're doing a great job, and I think the numbers are going to turn around. They've already turned around, and if you were at that Chamber of Music concert, I can't say enough about the kids, because that's really what it's about. We're giving them those opportunities, and we are so lucky. Portsmouth, it's, you know, it's in our history. We get to be there all the time, and it's a great community, and, you know, so wonderful to be part of. So I'll take any questions. Sorry I was so long-winded.
Questions? Elizabeth.
Thank you for being here. I think you'd be happy to hear that my son is actually taking drum lessons, full drum set at PMAC. But it is, I want to throw PMAC under the bus. It is pricey. I haven't applied for a scholarship, but I guess I'm wondering, you know, I was happy to see that at elementary school, kids are starting recorder in 3rd grade. I think we started maybe in 4th grade. And so I guess I wondered if there was any possibility of shifting down into 4th or 5th grade, or maybe shifting down into 4th grade for starting instruments. I know you mentioned percussion's not starting until middle school, but I guess I just wondered if there's a way to pick up
You know, I think you got to look at the big picture, and teachers are asked to do so much. I think we're really lucky in Portsmouth that the way we do our program, it's very systematic. A kid gets in 5th grade a one lesson, and then they become part of an after-school group. The commitment is really important. If you went down to another grade, and you know, there's a lot to be said about it developmentally. My wife is a music teacher. She teaches 4th and 5th graders only. That's all she does. But it works in her school. I think for us to do that, you would take more disruptions from a school day, and I don't necessarily feel that it buys you a big difference because of the way our middle school program is structured. I think for us it's really to look at, so we have a logical thing. A kid gets one lesson, then some after school. Middle school, they may get it 3 days, and now sometimes they get 6 days. The middle school is where it's changed the most, and not good or bad, but that's the middle school kids have more opportunities. There are more electives for middle school students to choose from, but there are less opportunities. They used to have a 7-period day, now they have a 6-period day. And you got to look at the whole schedule, why it is that way. So I'm not sure that's a good thing, and I'm not sure that I would even, you know, it could go there, but that would mean a huge staffing thing, and we don't, to me, I'd rather see us, you know, hire someone to start percussion again back in 5th grade. How do you, you know, that's why I came to Portsmouth. And that is part of my long-term plan. I think in 2 years, there'll be someone to go start teaching percussion at the elementary level, and I think that will be me. So I don't think that's necessarily the right idea. Yeah, I think I'd like to see us maintain what we have and support that and get those kids we've lost in the middle school through whatever, through the school funds or the city funds, and get them back engaged. So.
And then one more follow-up. As far as the other districts coming in, like Rye and Greenland and Newington, where are they coming in right now as far as comparative to where Portsmouth is setting them up? And is there
well, let's say there's been so much change in those other districts, sometimes there's no one coming. I'll give you an example. I talked about Lilia Potter-Schwartz. Michelle Worth, for many years, music teacher in Rye, had a string program. So every year I got 4 or 5 string players. Well, Michelle has left or whatever. Lily is the end of that. I don't see many string players coming in. Doesn't mean we won't provide an opportunity for someone who comes, but we can't control that. And I know there's a future of having some collaboration with SAU 50 to actually address that. So.
Okay, great.
Harry, and then Lisa.
Hi, I'm Carrie Nolte. We don't have name tags tonight, but nice to meet you. Thanks so much. And I just want to appreciate your bending over backwards, spending full weekends to make some of these things work. My one question in trying to learn the budget and figure that out recently, the multiple small positions you have, it sounds like that used to be a great fit, and maybe that isn't working just as economics have changed and things like that. Do you think that the budget will cover kind of what you need, or is that something that needs to be restructured?
Well, I think we have a stipend committee that can look at those and make adjustments as needed. I think the budget is more than enough right now. We have positions unfilled. So I don't really it's really not a money thing. And because we were closed down for 2 years, we really weren't allowing people. We didn't want people to be in front of our kids because of safety. So I think it's going to come back. I just think we need to give it a little bit of time. And if there is a need for that, I'm going to be the first one to ask for money. I don't have a problem with asking for money, but I'm also fiscally responsible to the community. So I think right now it's okay, but I could be wrong. We could look we look at that all the time. I will say that I was very lucky and allowed to shift funds in the last few years. The numbers are the same. I didn't spend more money, but we put it where we needed it. So that's what we have to do. We have to do that every year.
Great, thank you.
Lisa.
I definitely want to thank you for all the work you guys have been doing across all the schools during the pandemic. I had a kid who was getting ready for Frozen at the middle school, and I was amazed to see a chorus teacher come in new in the middle of all this and bond with those kids with the masks and do so much. So it's really appreciated. I guess my one question, big picture, is I totally hear what you're saying about how overstretched these teachers are already and not wanting to pile more onto their work life and certainly not infringe on their limited time off in the summer. But I hear in the community like a real need for more support for mental health and more social and emotional growth. And I think that the performing arts play a huge role in that for our kids, all the way K-12, and especially for the kids who don't do sports. Like, this is their place where they're happy. And so I guess I'm just wondering, and maybe not tonight, but in the future, if there's opportunities to offer more after school for kids at all the levels, even if that means that we need to create a part-time position or do some partnerships, or if we partner with PMAC to get them to the buildings so that people don't have to go there on the weekends and it can be more integrated with what kids have access to at school, that would be really amazing.
I think it's going to come back. I just think we weren't able to do it. Example, Courtney Randall has after-school ensembles going starting in January. She didn't do it before, but she's got 2 days of kids. And if you saw the 4 8th graders do their little routine and stuff, I mean, they're doing it. They just couldn't do it, and Nate Wanton has a middle school chamber. I watched 26 kids in his group already. Same with the high school magical singers. So, we just couldn't play. Like, literally in the last 2 weeks, we've taken off our masks. I think you're going to see, Alden Cable's rehearsing kids right now at the high school for our spring show. So it's happening. It's going to be there. It's just going to take a little time, I think.
Really appreciate that. I just want to know if there are things that we can do to support that happening.
And I think PMAC's ready. PMAC really is, Russ Grazier at PMAC is a PHS alumni. That's his plan. He never wants to infringe on the school, but he's always ready he wants to step in to help.
I'm over here, Nancy. You can't see me, so I'm going to speak up. First, I just want to say I did go to the performance the other night, and it was phenomenal just to be there without mask on and to see the kids. I have my kids have been in choir, and my son is still in choir. He's participated in a lot of the festivals and such, but it's really fun to see how they've evolved from middle schoolers into these brave kids that go before this audience and just sing like it's open mic night in Boston. And it was really very special. So I really love those kind of performances because the kids get to choose a lot of what they're doing for their performance. Not that I don't love all the formal stuff you guys do too, it's awesome, but it just shows the individuality of each artist. And so I appreciate that you guys take the extra step to put those kind of events on too for our kids to have their individuality. So for that, I say thank you. I have a few questions for you. One, I would more than welcome an email of your plan that you mentioned, because I love the idea of supporting our burnt-out teachers with a supplemental program through partnerships within our community. Portsmouth has a phenomenal arts community, both in drama and music, and so to be able to integrate that into our school program and potentially even offer some types of camps. There's so many of our parents that are always looking for camps, and so when I think that a summer program could be an entry into the arts for kids through ESSER dollars that may not be able to otherwise take that step or may not feel comfortable to take that step in a classroom environment in front of their peers for the first time. I just think that's a wonderful thing you guys are doing, so I would welcome a view of that plan. As far as my questions go, I'm curious, do you know what % of our students go on to study the arts at all?
It's not a high percentage, but there are, we do consistently have students majoring in the arts. But what I will tell you is we have students who go on to do other things who continue the arts as part of their life. And that really is what it's really about. We don't expect every kid, but we do have it in place that a kid can go through our program with rigorous training and major in music. Olin Johannesson is a student of ours. Courtney Randall is a student of ours. To me, that's really, and they're giving back to their community. So I think we have the best of both worlds right now. So I don't have I think we actually tried to pull that data out, and it's, I don't know. I don't think it's correct. So, but we have kids majoring every year in the performing arts. I didn't speak about Parents Music Club, but I really need to, because Parents Music Club really is, been so supportive, and as they've picked up a lot of the, to every single kid in drama got to go to California, whether they could afford it or not. I know we have the Opportunity Fund, but they funded $10,000 of their California trip this year. When the Clipper Band was going to Florida, they were going to fund $20,000, including all the staff's expenses to go. And whether it's an instrument, I said Ken Lindsay and I budgeted. We got a price of $80,000 for the sound system. We put in $100. By the time we were done, it was $125,000, and Parents Music Club picked up the $25,000 because they wanted to make sure that it was right. So they're doing it at all levels, but really it's to make sure. One thing I didn't mention, we started 111 kids, but when we started the 70-something grade 5 band members, we had 15 students who could not afford instruments. But working with our music company and alumni, we put an instrument in every single kid's hand. Like, we didn't say to me, it's like a kid wants to be in the band, we find a way to give the kid the instrument that they want. We used to all right, we have 2 trumpets and trombones, but we'll just find the right instrument for the kid. So that's really what it's about. So every kid in Portsmouth has the equal opportunity. There's even kids going to Florida, kids going to wherever, to California. So
I just had one quick follow-up question off of Lisa talking about mental health. I know for my son, choir is his mental health outlet through the pandemic, and certainly in returning. And I know sometimes if you're a junior, I see him already agonizing over his junior schedule, because choir has kind of been his, I have to work everything around choir and foreign language. Have we ever considered it like an alternative pathway for kids that want to continue doing music but may not be able to fit it into their junior year, but can return
every
to their
single
senior year? Or how's that work?
Every single kid can be in music. Every single kid chooses a schedule based on where they think they're going to go. I mean, the real kids who go on for music usually stay in the program, but Colin Yost, last year's valedictorian as well, weren't in band their junior and senior year. But they participated in the program. That's where I keep talking about what we've done is there are opportunities. Maybe you can't be in the core class, but you can be in part of the program. We make it work for every kid. So
that's good to know.
But we are even looking at that. I think Mrs. Lyons is doing a great job at looking how to get those classes to allow the kids to be there. But when numbers are low, it's like, if you're a numbers person, that they look at schedules that way. I think about it's a personalized education. What does this kid need to be successful and where they're going? So I think anyone who wants to be in the group can be in the group. We just have to, hand schedule them and work with guidance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm so glad to hear all the things that you were able to do during the pandemic, because I was under the impression that things had just ceased, and so I really appreciate all your out-of-the-box thinking and making sure that kids still had opportunities. That's been critical, I think, as Hope just said, for the social and emotional health of our kids. I am also thrilled to hear that you're giving the previous 5th graders now the experience that they missed last year, because my daughter was in that grade and I was really sad that she missed that. I know that was hard for her. But 2 questions. One is, in thinking about what Liz was mentioning about starting earlier, is Orff Ensemble still a thing, and is that something we might?
Well, Orff Ensemble was something, particularly New Franklin, Marty Robertson that was her thing, and she had those extra classes. But Orff is done in part of general music. So so general music is, our music teachers are now have aligned their curriculum better. So we used to have, 5 different schools, 5 different teachers, and the guidelines were so vague. there weren't even standards in music education when I started teaching back in 1988. They came out in 1994, and they were revised in 7 or 8 years ago. So you know, most music teachers were doing the best that they could with the knowledge that they had. So now we have a rock star elementary music teachers, just so you should know. They are rock stars, and they work great together. And they're on the same page. So you said recorder really is 4th grade. Sometimes a teacher will give a little extra in the 3rd grade, which leads you into, that's like the beginning training. You're doing the physical skills, and then you get an instrument in the 5th grade. The ORF things happen all the way through. Now, not every teacher is, you know, is the ORF thing. So Gina Connolly right now at Little Harbor has done this grant where she has these keyboards and technology, and she's exploring new ways. But, you know, every teacher you have to teach the standards. And the teacher teaches it, which is best through the things that they have, the tricks in their basket. So those ORF things are happening, but there's way more tools now than those teachers had when I started. So you should ask the teachers. They're doing some incredible things. Ukuleles are really big right now. So you know, really cool though, but really great stuff going on in the classroom. So.
Okay, and my other question was with regard to the ESSER funds. I think you've probably already been asked this, but is there a space that we need to create? Like, I mean, hopefully we're not going to have another pandemic.
Yeah, you know.
What about outdoor spaces?
So I think making an outdoor space would not be a great use of resources. Having stuff to do outdoors stuff would be better. Like, even if it's renting large size tents or renting platforms or risers, when you, like, I kept thinking about that, how much outside would there be? And when we did SpongeBob, I know we used we have the risers. People come to us for some of those resources. So I would think, I don't really think we have the nicest performing facilities. I mean, if we're going to go into lockdown again, maybe we should think about that. But I don't really, I really think we have the spaces. The middle school is such a beautiful space to perform. I mean, we've done it. You know, the high school we've spent, where maybe we should look at the HVAC and the auditorium and upgrading that. There are more things that would, like, let's make what we have even a little better. And like I said, you know, Little Harbor has no sound system. We're going to change that. You know, that's been the thing. There should be a place where each school has that place to build community. So.
I think I saw Brian's hand up, and then Hope, and then Elizabeth.
Yeah, no, I appreciate obviously your commitment to kids is obvious. Just what you guys did to bend over backwards to make that work. And I know that when you had I brought my kids to the Dondero thing when we were in the cars and had hot chocolate and heard the band, you know, playing. It was just great. And even those kids, you could see how excited they were to just be outside after being locked down for so long. So
that was a great night. That was one of those shining moments. We all felt so good after, like, we did something together. And it wasn't just high school, it was high school, elementary school. That's what I mean. Like, the team is really working together. That's, you know, the Chamber of Music Festival, that's what was so great. Every teacher, you know, Courtney Randall, Eric Gagnon, Nate Wanton, Alden Capel students. It was just an amazing night to be part of a team. It was just wonderful. So we got a great team.
Yeah, my kids loved it personally. They were screaming, singing in my ears. But my question was just, like, you had talked about the numbers going down. Do you actually have numbers?
Well, I can tell you pandemic numbers. We have less than half of what we had in the high school band when we started. We have 12 kids in the PHS percussion ensemble. We've had as many as 32. It's just, you know, you didn't feel safe. You didn't, and part of that is, you know, but we had 32 kids go to California, you know, so we've spread it out differently. I know the opportunities are there. I think that's really the important thing. They're still there. The same opportunities are there. I think people will come around. And we lost kids out of the district. I know we've lost some performing arts kids because that's just kind of what happened. So I see them rebounding. I really do.
Thanks.
Go ahead. Hope, will you first?
I just wanted to give a shout out to Nate. I know people were really concerned about, Mr. Johannesson's leaving, because he was the grounding force and so much around the choir and stuff. But I've had the opportunity to chaperone in a lot of the choir events, and you can just see the gravitational force that the kids have, that he brings to grounding those kids, and the energy that he brings. And I love that he's bringing back some old things that we used to do, and bringing a lot of new stuff too. So, you know, when I look at Mr. Capel, I know that's going to be another severe feeling of loss, but I have complete faith that we will find someone that is right, and we'll build that program. And I think you said it really well, Steve, that this is just a program that's evolving right now.
That's exactly where we are. It's funny, that same word. We are evolving.
Oh, Liz, okay.
So I just wanted to follow up. At some point when the middle school was done, I don't know if it was Caitlin, somebody had told me about how the middle school had Max and they were doing music composition on Max. I mean, obviously there's GarageBand and all these other softwares now. And so I guess I was wondering if you could speak to like where that's at, and if there's any way to sort of draw kids in through the use of technology in that way.
Well, that's actually one of the things we are looking at, is how we're going to change up the middle school electives. And as I said, it's not a problem. There's a lot of opportunities for middle school kids. And when there's more opportunities than there's time in the day. I think that's really the bigger issue right now. And we have to kind of balance that. It's a good problem to have, but there is a technology lab there, and I think that's going to become part of, like, well, every, you know, you're in band, you can go record in the lab, or you're in music class, you can go record in the lab, versus you take a class like, but Nate Wanton and Eric Gagnon have been talking about maybe we're going to have intro to technology and make a specific class. So that is on the table, and that's actually being talked about as we speak. So we have we have a beautiful lab at the middle school, and the high school music lab just got new iMacs this year. So that's in the works.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Sorry.
One more question. Okay, and then we're going to wrap this up.
I didn't want to ask a question. I just wanted to provide some feedback from an SA50 perspective, if I can. Really nice to meet you. I'm Tally. I know you've got at least one percussion person coming in.
All right.
Because he's mine.
Okay.
But I just wanted to say, too, that both SAU50 schools of Greenland and Rye have had infrastructure changes that also are going to hopefully contribute to boosting the program. You know, Greenland, after March the 8th, will have a full-time band teacher.
Awesome.
So they're restructuring the middle school beginning next year to offer more opportunities for students to participate more frequently in band. And I think Rye has also boosted their music position as well. So
I do know that Rye kids came to the first 8th grade open house very enthusiastic about being in band. So Eric Gagnon was like, I haven't seen that before. So there is a positive vibe. So that's great to hear.
Lisa, you can be the...
All right, well, I have to echo,
Finalist.
Nate Wadden is amazing. And that really has been my child's like happy place throughout the pandemic, even with the mask and all the other stuff. Like that's been the one place where they felt good all day, you know, with everything else going on. And I guess my one question for high school is a little bit following on what Hope said, is it can feel tricky for those kids with the scheduling, especially if they also want to do a foreign language to stay in choir. And I wondered if you could say anything else about what are the opportunities if they want to sing or play and they can't make it work in their schedule.
Well, I mean, I do know there's chamber singers after school. I mean, madrigal singers. So there are other things. And what Nate has really done is he's allowed those kids to come and flex. He had to bring a friend to Flex Day for choir, and he got as many kids. He got more kids in the choir to come to the after school thing. So that's part of the that's where Eric Gagnon has done a great job as well. He's used that flex time to bring those other kids back into the program. So we are using that time wisely. So good questions. Well, I just want to say thank you to the board, because we couldn't do it without your support, and I feel honored to lead such a great team, and my mission is to keep it going and to, you know, give them I started this position to give my teachers the resources they need, and I don't just mean the stuff. I mean the space, the scheduling, and the support, you know. And I think having me as support, I will tell you, Nate's in my office asking questions every day. And I was thinking, 10 years ago, we didn't have someone for Nate to ask questions to every day. And that's really important. So when you talked about social and well-being, I feel like that's really been a lot of my role. I mean, I've spent a lot of this year, I've subbed at every single level. I taught kindergarten music this year for the first time in 30-something years. But it reminded me, like, why I went into education. I went in tears when I went home that day talking to my wife. We are so lucky in Portsmouth. These kids love the arts. So that's a tribute to what you've allowed us to to give them for an experience.
Well, thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Oh, it's Music in Our Schools Month anyway, so thanks. Have a great night.
Okay. We will move on to the superintendent's report.
So, yeah, brief report in your packet. You have the email correspondence since your last meeting and the March 22nd Board Administrator edition. Also in correspondence tonight are the resignations, as referred to just a minute ago by Mr. Cirillo, of Alden Capel, our drama teacher, as well as Tiffany DeMore would come, our business teacher. So we do accept those with regret.
Okay. Are you the next item on the agenda?
I suppose so. So update on administrative search. So this, I know, is primarily focused on the PHS principal search. I would say, before I turn it over to George, because he did that meeting, we were double booked today. He was doing the principal search, and I was doing an athletic director interview. So both of those committees have been up and running. The athletic director committee is a little ahead of the principal committee. We have met a few times. We've selected interviews. We did interviews today, and we'll be announcing next steps shortly. But our high school committee, which is a larger committee with multiple stakeholders, I think we went with the rule of fours: 4 students, 4 staff, 4 parents, 4 administrators, 4 goats, whatever. But George ran the meeting today, so I will turn it over to him.
Sure. So we had our organizational meeting today and started to come up with, we pulled themes both mathematically and conceptually from all the feedback that we've had. So we put out a survey to families about what their priorities for the building are, what the characteristics of the principal they'd like, what the strengths of the school are. And so we're pulling those out and sort of developing a profile for what we're looking for, as well as the major pieces we want to see that moving forward at Portsmouth High School. So that's being turned, we'll take that and use it to create our list of questions for interviews. We have 20 applicants for the position at this time. It closes on Friday, and we will be sending those to the team at the end of this week and doing our initial screening of them, selecting team for interview, selecting candidates for interviews. We also developed our process timeline today, which we'll put out about what that's going to look like in terms of timing, in terms of when the public is going to be able to see the candidates and provide feedback, as well as potential site visits. So that's where we stand.
Carrie.
How many applicants were there for the athletic director position? And that closed last week, right?
Yeah, that closed last week. We had 3 total applicants for that position, and we interviewed 2 candidates.
Liz.
For both positions, the athletic and the principal, I guess more so the principal, is there any priority given to internal candidates as far as, obviously we're sort of past this point, but I know in some government positions, internal candidates have a earlier window to apply and are considered first. So is there any sort of priority or credit given to internal candidates?
So in terms of, I know what you're talking about in terms of municipal positions with the postings, internal postings only for 5 days with allow. There are some guidelines around that with the city, that not necessarily within this particular administrative position is that a requirement. So no, we'll look at everyone with their merits, and certainly, internal candidates would have some internal people that are familiar with them on the committee, right? So internal candidates are more likely to have someone that knows them, so there's more data points on those people, which certainly can be an asset. But I don't think you come in with 10 extra points at the beginning. Is what I would say. But it's it's more well-rounded information. Yeah.
Hope.
Is there an email or website, or where can parents go for updates and seeing the list of committee members and kind of the timeline that you're talking about rolling
We'll
out?
be putting it out. Yep.
Who will be putting it? Will that go through Parent Square or
Yep.
Okay.
Again, we just had our first organizational meeting this afternoon, but we'll put the information out about the process timeline, the committee members.
And I don't know if we mentioned, but we did have over 40 people express interest in being on the committee, so it's definitely a good.
So there's 4 students, 4 staff, 4 parents, and 4 admin.
I guess my question is, when you put that information out, will there be an email that if people have questions about that, there'll be somewhere they can email about
Yes,
questions?
gshay@sau52.org.
Okay.
And Margaret and I met and talked about our school
Sorry,
board
Georgia.
representative for this
Hoping it
committee,
might not be you.
and Lisa has agreed to be our school board representative to the PHS Principal Search Committee. So Lisa can keep, if you have any questions, you can ask Lisa too.
Is there one on the AD? Or no?
Yeah, there was, but the schedule was so compressed this last week, I couldn't attend. So, yeah, I tried. But I didn't realize we were going to do interviews this quickly, so.
Liz?
I just, I'm not concerned about Lisa or Brian, so to speak, but I am concerned to some extent, and I think I've expressed this, before, the superintendent's role is to hire these positions, and so I am a little bit concerned with having school board representatives on these committees, because I do think that we need to be, it's not like we're doing the superintendent search and we have, I just don't want to get into, not that any disrespect to Lisa or Brian or anybody else that was on that would be on a committee in respect. I guess I do have concern with any school board member getting in on the hiring committee, because I think it's the superintendent's job to pick these people and then bring them to us.
I guess I'm just thinking of past committees where we've done this and we've always had a school board representative on the committee. I can't recall any time when we did not. I'm going back to when we revised the athletic contract, and I was the chairman of that committee, and we had a couple of school board members on that committee. So we have often had school board members on committees like this.
And
so it's just a habit, precedent that we've always had.
I was
don't
going to say,
know.
the distinction I would make, Liz, is on the superintendent search committee, that committee was advising the school board. In this case, the whole committee is advising us for the candidate to nominate, so
Yeah, I
it
guess
still
I
is an administrative
I
responsibility.
just don't want to get in a position where the school board member is sort of turned to as like a head of a committee or something, when it's really the superintendent's role to pick somebody and then bring it to us to sort of make a determination. So it's not like we're spearheading any sort of hiring in roles that we shouldn't be we're just approving. We're not inserting our say into it, I guess. So I just say that with just kind of proceed with caution to some extent.
I was just going to add that I see that person as sort of a liaison between the committee and the board. So it's someone that if you had thoughts about the hiring process or who was being hired or whatever, or the needs of the high school, that you would relay that to Lisa, and then she could bring that to the committee as a representative of all of us. But I don't think it's ever just sort of one person. I think it's sort of the opposite of what you're saying. As Steve said, it's like we're advising them in this case, and the person who's on that committee is the one who's representing the whole board in that.
Yeah, I guess I just want to caution against that, because I think it's.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
I would also say that there are other districts where the board can override any, it just happened next door in Stratham, the board override the candidates that were presented. So I think the way that we have it set up is, as Steve said, it's more just to keep the big picture lens present in the committee, because the board often hears so many more different lenses of the needs, and it's a conduit of communication, not a manager of the committee, which is very different than how a lot of other districts do it. So I think it's a great way of diversifying that committee and making sure all voices are heard.
Okay. Thank you, Liz, for bringing that up.
Excuse me, I just have a quick question around just Brian making mention that interviews are happening for the AD. So what, if interviews are already taking place, where is the community input into that? And what's the timeline like? I haven't seen anything go out around timeline and process
Yeah,
so much about
put
that.
out the AD one a little ahead of the principal, and that committee has met for longer now. Then today just started the principal search, so the timeline's a little ahead of that.
But if there's only 2, that'll be a pretty quick interview process. So
Yeah,
I'm just curious
well, again, we've
when's
had
the
3
input?
I think part of the scope of time is defined by the number of applicants we got. We had
Right.
3 applicants, so certainly doable in the time that we've had. We had plenty of time to review the applications and choose the interviews and hold them today.
So was there a time that there was input from the sports community? I mean, Portsmouth has a pretty strong opinionated sports community, as we know, so I'm
Yeah.
just curious, was there an opportunity to hear the feedback from them at all in the process?
Well, we had the posting out there. I got a lot of feedback,
Okay.
actually,
Getting a
from
lot
the
of
committee.
emails.
We've been
Okay.
gotten more than the principal search, I would say, for the athletic
So it surprised me.
director
so-
search, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're on to, oh, do you have anything else?
No?
No? Okay, Nathan, financial report.
Your February ending report is in the packet. I feel like a broken record, I think. Compared to budget, everything, we're doing well. I would draw your attention to the vacancies that continue to drive salary variances. 2 areas, I guess, that, if you're looking for bad news, I mean, it's generally good news this year, despite some of the cuts that we made in the budget process building this year. In the area of psychology, district-wide psych, down cost center 137, that'll end up over budget, not measurably against 50 million, but it'll be 10 or 15,000 over. And there have just been a flood of consulting agreements that needed to be written for evaluations and work beyond what could be done by internal staff. I think we're still doing some of the analysis, but I think if you go to 165, you're out of district tuition and services. It's running in red now, but again, remember, that's versus plan. It's still well within budget, but methinks that's gonna, I think it's gonna pop. I think you're gonna see, we'll be a little over there. But obviously, across the board, there have been some savings. A really significant positive variance, if you wanted to drop to it, is maintenance, where in the operating cuts that we took in the last, no, not the budget you guys just built with us, right, but the one that we built last year for this year. I say you guys, meaning you collectively, this board. When we built last year's budget, we took some significant cuts in operating, and in a lot of the operating cuts hit in Kenny's area in maintenance. And 125,000 some odd, but he's clearly proceeding with some governors on, some care, because he's 100,000 below the plan and almost 100,000, I think, against what he would have spent by this time last year. So we've been creative with some of that, but I think he's also waiting a bit to make sure that any project that he might need to launch, big maintenance issue, considers first where we're going to land for the year. So he may speed up in his spending in the next 2 or 3 months as he tackles a few things towards summer. But remember, we do have CIP funds. We're moving ahead with the air conditioning work at New Franklin this summer. He just floated past me today the bid request that'll go out for bleachers at the high school. There will be roofing work coming as well. So even though he's saving some dollars here, he's continuing to spend the capital dollars that came to us out of the CIP in the last couple of cycles. So all in all, I think the biggest red items you see are related to the math tutor that we may absorb or we may kick to ESSER, some of the PPE stuff that we had already talked about in the initial plan. So I would say all continues to be good news, and forgive me for having tried to find you a little bad news in there. Carrie?
I'm just curious why the school board is so overspent on its budget for the year.
You guys, I mean, I can't.
It's all the money they pay us.
Can't rein you in no matter how hard I try. We charge the search consultant.
Okay.
For the superintendent search there, and we'll have to shift some dollars to make sure that we accommodate that, because it was late in the cycle when we made that decision to move forward. I will tell you, we don't see it here regularly, but your food service program is absolutely blowing the doors off the place. And so shout out to Deb Rizzo, your director, and the staff that have stuck with us in that program. So this year has been a year of universal eligibility for free lunch,
Everybody.
which has been difficult to make everybody understand. We'll have to do some retraining because it looks like Congress has shut the door on that. There won't be universal opportunities next year that way. So we have to go back to, you have to complete your free and reduced lunch applications, do that quickly, get that stuff in. And then things like, I want a milk, please. The milk has cost, it's a different program when we don't have Uncle Sam sweeping it up for us easily. But at least for this year, that program it's supposed to be a nonprofit program, but it's certainly holding its own and doing well. The rate that Uncle Sam is reimbursing at is higher than what our local costs normally are. We have been, unfortunately, really understaffed. And so we have more money, but are paying less people because we just have struggled to get people in the door, thanks to the staff that have done that. We have, the last couple of years, had to make significant budget transfers out of the general fund and eat the expense in the general fund to cover the losses of the food service program. And this year, that clearly won't be necessary. They're running ahead now, and will continue to through June, so.
Terry, did you have another question?
Do we this is a ridiculous idea, do we fundraise for like the Opportunity Fund or things like that? And I'll tell you why, if there's a structure, but as a parent who has benefited from free lunch, I would be very compelled if someone said, the cost of your free lunch for the last year would be whatever number, would you consider donating that to the Opportunity Fund? I feel like that could be a really compelling way to get parents who maybe had the means to pay for lunch but didn't to support it.
That's a good idea.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, we have at different times publicized a fundraising effort associated with it, not this year, but that would be a great idea.
So let me jump on that and say, in the past, I've worked in situations where local entities, donors, fundraising entities, nonprofits, other social service groups have supported the food service program to help with
Paying off back balances or bills.
Back balances, and also things that weren't included.
Aren't covered by the federal lunch program.
Things that aren't included, like at snack time,
Yeah.
I want to go do what everybody else is doing, and free and
I want
reduced
the
doesn't
chips.
cover this. Bag of chips, that kind of thing, thank you. And they have covered that across the board, at the end of the year, and had some planning, so something, I mean.
And it could even be, maybe not the Opportunity Fund, but to cover future years, a fund to cover future years, folks that can't pay but didn't do their paperwork for free and reduced lunch. So anyway, just to.
It's a great suggestion. We can keep chasing possibilities there.
I'm happy to help with that if I can.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Margot.
Two things, since we're on the topic of free lunch. Is there a legal time when we have to hand out the paperwork, or could we roll it out earlier? Like at the end of this school year, when we're reaping the benefits of the free lunch, to make it very clear it's not here next year. In order to get it, you have to fill this out, because it feels like one of the shortcomings is not as many people register as the need is there, and I wonder whether we can reconsider how we communicate the change is coming well in advance, how we can send the forms out in a way that every family has access to them, and our numbers are the most accurate going into planning for the fall.
So this is a challenge nationwide, and it will be. Everybody's going to face the same kind of hurdle of getting people back in the habit of completing paperwork that they effectively didn't need to do this last cycle. But there are new income guidelines that come out over the summer, and so it's into August normally before, maybe the end of July, but generally I'm thinking into August before we get the completed application and criteria from the USDA down from the federal level. And then we put them together and we try to get the letters ready. I couldn't tell you right now how the packet goes out.
Quick turnaround.
But we turn stuff around, but normally it's a part of the summer packet that's prepared for each family. And we have an online application process so that folks can electronically do that. It supports any kind of device. You can go mobile any way you might be able to go mobile, or, any way you can go online. But paper can still be processed as well. So, I think there are opportunities there. The timeline of it is tough because it really happens near to when we get ready to go back to school.
Okay.
But Margaret, this was actually a topic the equity class that we had done, a group of teachers, actually the high school guidance staff who were in that class, that was their project. They wanted to try to break down some of the barriers for students filling that out, because that gets worse as the kids get up to high
Right.
school, right? So trying to find different and creative ways to make sure that they, and for the primary purpose of accessing the opportunity fund. So how do we help them meet that threshold of, allowability to access those monies? So, yeah, it's something we can continue to talk about, how we can
Yeah.
make it easier for folks.
And maybe the communication committee can toss around how early, I think families should know sooner than later that next year,
Well,
right,
one of
the
things
chuck
they were
wagon
gonna-
is not.
Yeah, and one of the things they were going to do, which we don't communicate clearly right now, is just put a list together of all the advantages of accessing the opportunity fund,
Right.
through the grade level, so parents
Right.
are really aware of what benefit that is.
And so help me, anything that could, the closer you can get to everybody, just as a rule, who completes the paperwork and goes through the process, because again, there are individual opportunities that come to people, to families and to students. But in the aggregate, obviously, this data point gets used multiple times by the federal level and the state level to pass funds and allocate dollars that come from outside our community to benefit our students here. And you can't mandate that everybody complete the form, but the closer we can get to everybody just does it as a rule every year, the better those numbers are gonna look, and the more competitive, sadly, if you use that word that way, the more competitive we are for federal dollars, so.
Okay. The only other comment I was going to make is, I don't know, because ESSER is coming up tonight. Some of these things that you point out with the math and the reading being over, to me, makes me feel good about some of the buckets that have been mentioned for ESSER. It highlights how great the need is going to be going forward. I mean, this was budgeted in and we're already over. So I just wanted to make that comment as we frame our mindset for the ESSER conversation later.
Lisa?
I just wanted to follow up quickly on the free reduced lunch. I mean, I've seen the enrollment challenges in the past from switching between universal free lunch and then not. I think it's really important to communicate to the kids, especially at the middle school and high school level, that there is no stigma with this. It continues. It has nothing to do with how good or bad your family is. This is just food that's available to everybody. Because I do think that part of the advantage that we got from the pandemic was taking away the issues in the lunch lines of like who can afford the milk and who can't, and who's told to stand aside because they're, not paid up. And I just would like to be really thoughtful. And if there are any funds that we need to throw at the problem at the beginning of the year, just to make sure that none of the students have, I don't know how we've handled that in the past, but it's a tough transition for kids.
Yeah.
And they won't get it. And I think if you can communicate this year while kids are still benefiting from it, even if we don't have the forms, but to say this is a fantastic opportunity for all of our students, and it will continue for everybody who has a financial need for it. There is a one-page form you have to fill out that takes 2 minutes. It doesn't get reported to anybody else in the government. It won't affect your taxes or your Medicaid or your housing or anything else, and all it does is get you food in school. Like communicating that to people really clearly, because I think a lot of people don't fill it out because they're worried they're going to lose a benefit over here if they get a benefit in school, which is not true.
Right.
Like all that does is go to the school and get them food. It doesn't do anything else for them.
Liz?
So a couple points. So I just want to throw this out there. We're in March right now, so there is a possibility that this program can actually roll forward. Once people's feet get to the fire in the legislature or in the federal government, and people realize that this isn't going to be happening, there could be an effort to sort of keep it going. Just like my student loans are on freeze right now, even though they told me I was going to start paying in January. So. Am I right in saying that? I mean, obviously we have to prepare for what's coming forward, but I mean, there is a possibility that this program could still roll on, right? I mean,
Yes, I would never predict.
No, but I guess I don't know what the conversation is right now, but I guess
It died in Congress without support.
Okay.
Without sufficient support, I should say. The report, the answer came down, or the message came down from the USDA letting us know that universal eligibility is not to be expected next year, and they're already taking steps to try to provide whatever support and insight and advice they can to help with the transition. So like I said, it's going to be a national conversation about how we do this. Your comments are very well taken. Ms. Rizzo and I have been talking. We haven't had a lot of time to talk because she's continuing to cut vegetables and wash dishes because she's short of so many staff members that she literally is in 3 or 4 of the kitchens every day running. So, but it's on our list that we've got to brainstorm and come up with ways to start in the spring and before the end of school, trying to educate people about what's coming in the fall, only so that we don't lose the opportunity to use the summer months.
And so my second point being, I've been a low-income family. I've dealt with low-income families, and I think each one of us sitting at the table, whether we're low-income or not, has a level of burnout with COVID, especially. And so I pose this to the board and to everybody to sort of understand that I don't think it's a matter of communicating to people that if you fill out this form or you fill out the online website, you're going to get XYZ benefits. I think it's a matter of the burnout people have of doing one more thing on their list of things, and the kids that probably need it the most need their parent to do that one more thing, but that parent is also doing one more thing to make sure that their kid has food on the table that night, or gets a shower before they go to bed, or has food on the table. So I guess I pose that saying, and I guess right now I'm just sort of riffing ideas, but we have an open house point, and I sort of wonder if there's a process point of like getting a stand that says, come talk to me at the open house. Like, we got to get the person in the door at a table in front of us and basically help them right there, fill out the form at the table, and then let them leave with it completed. So I think it's going to be a place of or having somebody, I know that there's a liaison now for housing, and having those people go into the house, going into housing and say, hey, I need you, let's work on this form together right now, or part of the program, or whether we go to Seacoast Mental Health and have outreach or Families First, or I think we have to sort of get the form and be there with somebody to some extent too. So I would hesitate, I think it'd be great to sort of think about it in the communications committee, but I would hesitate to like throw communication at this. I think it's more of a, you bring it to people's faces. So that would be my only, from doing a social service standpoint and being in it myself, that would be my only recommendation.
I don't think it should be either or, though. I mean, I've done this outreach personally, like on the streets, like in Title I schools. It's a lot of work. You're absolutely right. People are busy. Some people don't know what the form is. They don't have time. But you kind of have to do it every which way.
Yeah.
And like, it's got to be like reaching people in a lot of different directions, and if you're lucky, you'll get like maybe 50-60% of the school signed up. But
we do set up kiosks at open houses, and also usually at Gosling during things like that. We do a lot of outreach.
On the on the online forms, I know that one of the things I found helpful is a lot of the information is now automated, and then you're just checking to see if it's a change or if you're opting in or opting out. Can we automate where we were at the start of when we started getting the free, so people can see like, oh, okay. I mean, you can highlight that form, right? So we know that we at least have called that many people, and then it's a highlighted form for people that haven't. So if we can automate information, then we're already taking that step for people.
Okay, let's have one more comment, question. Kerry?
I was just going to say, I don't recall at Families First ever having had those forms, and we do so many forms with families anyway for Medicaid renewal, stuff like that. So maybe just getting those to Crossroads, getting those to places, putting the link on the computers at Crossroads, so just a few other options, like Liz said.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Well, most of them go to...
Nathan, are you, Nathan and Steve, the ESSER funds?
What is it?
Yeah, we'll roll into ESSER funds, keep talking about the money. And the real purpose of the discussion tonight was to allow the board to have discussion over what feedback you rose to the top for you from the survey we put out. We sent you the full complement of responses that we received from the use of funds survey for the ESSER funds, heavily dominated by parents and staff, but I would say a wide variety of responses on that survey. And we don't have to make any decisions tonight about what those funds will be used for. But we did put out a draft spending plan in that survey for feedback also to that. And again, some of again, a wide variety of things, some common themes around the mental health supports and the learning loss, et cetera, and some facilities. But other than that, there were some ideas that hadn't come up yet, to this point in our process either. But of course, of note, we put in the draft plan an expectation that we could be using up to, say, $2 million of ESSER funds for becoming a capital partner with the city in the purchase of community campus for the purpose of moving Lister Academy to community campus. Nathan and I know Margot and Nancy met with the mayor and city manager, and we've been working with the city now for a couple of weeks in earnest to see what other options exist, because quite honestly, and this goes both for the school side as well for the city side, the use of our ESSER funds, and in the city's case, the use of their ARPA funds, do seem to have restraints around the use. Trying to get through the approval process for capital purchases has been difficult. And questions have been raised, not just in the short term, but in the long term. What happens to these buildings or this property, 20 years from now? What if you give it up? What happens to that money? Do we have to give it back to the government, et cetera? So I know the city the city manager is working with the city council around other financing options around community campus. And the good news to you in that is that pretty much we've taken off the table the use of $2 million of ESSER funds. And so that would free this conversation up eventually to be a much more robust conversation of what other needs exist. And we have still the opportunity, which we would highly recommend, moving the Lister Academy program at some point when community campus is ready. We have some renovation work to do over to community campus. And again, the good news there is we, at this point, are not looking at a rental arrangement. We would be able to put that program in that space. So we're very excited about that, and we're very excited again about what this might mean for the use of ESSER funds over the time period we have, which again, in reminding you, is multiple years, not 1 year. So we want to look at a long-term strategy with some of these things. Certainly there will be some fit-up costs to community campus, nowhere in the near $2 million range, but ESSER funds would likely be appropriate for whatever funds might be necessary to get that space for our purposes up and running. I'd turn it to Nathan, though.
So, I guess the one thing that I would say is when we had our first survey that went out, I put together some data for you to talk about categorically the themes that came out of the feedback. I'm working on that right now to parse out. There was a lot more free-form input that was provided. You've had a chance to see it now. So parsing out, even in individual responses, 3 or 4 different elements, and trying to tie that back to the extent that it stays consistent with the larger themes that came out of the original batch. Facility, including air conditioning and air quality, social emotional learning, staffing increases. Remember those categories. So I'm working to pull that together, and we'll feed into that, your conversation tonight, any of the feedback that you guys might have. So when I have that, it'll come. It's been suggested or requested that it would be helpful, based on a couple of the conversations, at least that I know came out of the public forums, to be able to offer up some graphical illustration of how much is going in, how much it might be proposed for one purpose or another, and then establishing some kind of a graphical crosswalk against the needs that were expressed and what the proposal calls out. I would suggest, though, that one of the things that I'm conscious of, and it's been suggested before, is to try to find a way to blend in the elements of our budget proposal that we just completed that spoke to some of those suggestions that have been made in the feedback cycle that we've had now at least a couple of times. So working on that, and we'll try to add to that whatever comes out of tonight.
I just wanted to make a comment that Margot and I were involved in the meeting with the city manager and the mayor, and then we had another meeting with the city manager, and I just want to say thank you to the city for being so willing and cooperative to work with us on the Lister Academy going to the community campus. I mean, at one point, it was going to cost us $2 million, and now it's not going to cost us anything, potentially. I mean, the city council has to vote on this. It's not carved in stone yet, but, you know, it's just wonderful that the city, the manager, the mayor, and potentially the city council has their arms open to us, and I think we should be very thankful for that. It's a great city that we live in. And I want to thank Nathan for all his hard work on this. He's had numerous meetings with the city staff, and Steve and George, I mean, Steve's been involved in George a little bit, because George is doing other things, but our administrative team has been great too. So I'm just really proud. I'm really proud of how our city operates and how they're willing to work with us, and I just wanted to make that comment. Yes, Ann?
I just wanted to comment on the feedback from so many people, and so much of what they think should happen are things that we already have in the budget and that we've been talking about. And over and over again, the same things came up.
The same issues.
Really interesting to read it.
And I don't want to jump in line, but I will say I was struck by, as often is the case when you have that kind of wide open public feedback, public conversation, I was struck by I think we should go left. And then three, four more down, I think we should clearly go right. Left would be absolutely, so there are on a number, and I'm not calling out anything specific, but on a number of different topics that are, I think, a part of your conversation about the priorities for these funds. You've got the whole spectrum. You've got
Yes.
those that are, that want to go in one direction and those that want to go in the other. So there's a lot for you to deliberate on, I'm sure.
Let's start on this side for Liz.
I just want to frame the conversation and ask, can you be clear with us again, what are the timelines as far as spending this money? How much is there and when does it need to be spent by? Because I am concerned that if there is a large amount of money and we have it sitting there and then we have to go through approval process, I don't want to get to some sort of end date. If there are bigger projects that we could spend on quickly and use our funds in our budget towards the smaller things that might, if we know these bigger projects will get approved with ESSER, I'd rather, pull that money from our, what maybe we've considered in our budget, or I guess I'm just, in maybe a regular budget would be better suited for some of the stuff that would be ESSER focused as well. So, if there needs to be shifting. So I guess I'm just concerned and wanting to know, what is the deadline? What are the timelines here? And, is there a possibility that we should try to eat it up as quickly as possible on some things and shift some money around? If that makes sense.
So right now you have available to you your ESSER $2 that came out of the CRISA Act that are just a little over $1.2 million. You have access to that to be spent through September of '23. And then the larger amount is ESSER 3 that came out of the ARP Act. That's 2.7 million and change, and that's available to you for spending until September 30th of '24. And of that amount, you have 20% mandatory set aside to address items related to learning loss. That number adds up to $555,000.
But that's part of the 2.7 million.
That's part of that needs to come out of, and no reason why you couldn't use $1 million against learning loss, or $2 million, or the whole thing against items related to learning loss, but you must spend at least that 20%. There is a apply and approve and then spend and claim reimbursement process, and so I wouldn't want to wait to start spending money in, June of '23, but we haven't rushed to allocate and use all of those funds simply because we haven't had to rush. And again, things feel today like they're becoming clearer, but if you go back 6 months or 9 months, every time you think things are going to be becoming clearer, then conditions on the ground change. Now there's a new variant coming, and and so there's been a concern that we should just continue to be very deliberate, because you may yet have an unforeseen need that arises, and these dollars might be able to help, so.
And can I give you a hypothetical just so that you can sort of explain when the deadline sort of hits? So here's the hypothetical. Let's say we wanted to put air conditioning in the schools to help support summer programming, to help with learning loss in that way, and we see if they will approve us for air conditioning in a school, let's say. When is the deadline? Is the deadline once the project is completely done and installed and then we get the payout? Needs to be completed by September 2023? I guess I just want to be sure that we're not in a situation, I don't think you'd put us in a situation like this, but I guess I'm just wondering if there's a bigger project that we need to consider for these funds, or maybe be a good use of these funds, if it's going to take, you know, getting bids for the project, then doing the project, and then actually getting everything installed before this payout is sort of finalized, and that's the cutoff point, then, you know, we may need to really, you know, make some decisions sooner than later, I guess.
So I guess I would say, if you're talking about a capital project of any sort, and in this case, we were talking about a capital acquisition, which really seemed to get in the way of the federal government. They weren't sure what to do with acquiring property like that. But capital in terms of installing air conditioning, for instance, in your example, we've probably already missed the window to engage that kind of work for this summer, other than the work that we're already talking about at New Franklin and at Little Harbor and Dondero, because we've already started that process. We've had the space assessment done. We have some sense. And so the timeline would be backing up from next summer, wanting the work to be done by the opening of school, which is time enough for us to complete the billing and the paperwork and the reimbursement and be done for the September 30th of 23 deadline, certainly the same thing a year later for the 24 deadline. We would have to sometime this summer or fall start to get serious about it so that we could engage the bid process and be ready to boots on the ground getting the work done as soon as school was out next summer, next June. So I guess, are there deadlines? Yeah, there are reasonable timelines. The only complicating challenge that exists in all of that is that if you're in that world right now with building materials and such, there is the risk that there aren't companies who can do the work, there aren't materials that you can buy. We've been given some assurance that the units that we're talking about purchasing and implementing at New Franklin, and additionally, if we were going to do Dondero and Little Harbor work, those right now seem to be available. They're in inventory. You could put a plan together. So that's something that's a bit of an unknown. Is there something else that will happen in this world, or in this region at least, that will drive us to the point that next spring, when we say, you know, we've ordered this, but now it's a 6-month lead time before you can get a compressor in or a rooftop split or what have you? Those are possibilities, but right now, what we're talking about, again, generally, the things that we would be talking about needing are mainstream enough so that there continues to be available inventory, although generally at higher price than it was 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, is there any possibility, I guess with that being said, is there any possibility of getting AC in the schools before this summer so that we could teach the kids, you know, have summer programming at the schools, in the schools? I mean, you know.
Before this summer.
Yeah, you're saying there's no way.
I don't think so. No, we're right now, we have a plan as soon as school is out at New Franklin to install the air conditioning in New Franklin.
Yeah.
And that same vendor is working with us to be prepared to get the go order to move forward with putting in air conditioning in some limited spaces at Dondero and at Little Harbor, all of which we hope would be completed by the start of school in September, so that it would be available to us in the summer of '23. I can't guarantee, as I sit here right now, because we just haven't put enough commitment to it, that they could get the labor and the material and do the work at Dondero, Little Harbor, but that's right now the plan, the hope, is that they could do some of that this summer, but not this spring in time to use it this summer.
So do we need to take a vote sooner than later so we can purchase compressors or whatnot with ESSER funds if that's what we choose to do? Is what you're saying, like the product is there and there's a risk that it wouldn't be?
I mean, I guess if it's, I wasn't expecting that we would take action tonight or anytime immediately, but that the conversation would move us in that direction. And really queuing them up for Little Harbor and Dondero was a hopeful idea. I really expected that probably would be work that we would better identify and likely do next summer.
Okay. And my last question is just the deadline of September 2023 for this first ESSER 2 funds. That is the deadline of when we would have to complete the project to get the payout, essentially. So whatever we decide to do with it, right? would need to be sort of, like, if it were a building project or retrofitting or something, the project would need to be, like, where's the deadline fall? The deadline falls on the day that the project starts, when the government pays, or when the project finishes and the government reimburses us for the cost?
I guess there are opportunities, there are windows of claim and reimburse that maybe extend beyond, but I guess for our purposes, I would prefer to just say, we need to have spent the money and be done with whatever we're going to do before we get into September, more than a couple of
Okay,
days.
all right, thank you.
Okay, so Hope and Lisa and Kerry.
I have to regroup to think of my question now. No,
you want to
sorry, no, it's okay. So we've talked a lot about capital expenditures. I saw a lot of needs for intervention around math and obviously mental health, and we did get to hear from Chris. Was it our last meeting that we heard from Chris? So I would love to revisit with the wellness committee and the wellness club and the school counselors, whoever is kind of uniting that wellness front around mental health, of because she commented on maybe some specific things around the curriculum, but what that would look like, what those numbers might look like, and how that might be implemented. But in all the conversations that we've heard from each level, math keeps coming up. And so I would love to hear from Steve and George, not tonight, but how we can be more intentional around math intervention. And I know one of the things we're trying to shy away from is FTEs, per se, of adding more heads to the books for long term. But it does seem that if we have a 2-year window, we could put together a very intentional 2-year rollout of a supplemental learning loss interventional program around math that might allow for more tutors. It might allow for some temporary positions that may not be necessary for long term, but help to build back up those numbers, kind of level things out, and just give our staff some breathing room too by bringing people in from a temporary perspective. I don't sit here claiming to be the math expert, so I don't know if that's a task force, Steve, or if it's just, but I would love to see each level, instead of asking for things on a silo perspective, I would like to see a more comprehensive kind of K through 12 attack plan of how we can kind of earmark some dollars for learning loss around math, and maybe if there's other areas that teachers feel that there's need. So I just want to put that out there. And
yeah, we can certainly put on the agenda coming up, because that's part of planning that's already been in place, especially for the extended day programming, the summer programs, and the iteration that we'll do this summer, and other things. But I agree. I think a real focused level of support and intervention in math would be of great benefit.
Who was next, Lisa?
I had one comment and then a question that kind of piggybacks on what Hope was saying. But one thing that struck me in reading through all of the feedback that we got, aside from one over here and one over here, like Nathan said, was that people really were sort of bubbling up a lot of the things that have been kind of our long-standing missions. You know, there was a lot around wellness. There was a lot around equity and diversity. There was a lot around sort of learning loss, but that's also kind of fundamentally an equity question. So I guess I would like to make sure that we're reaching out to the corners of the district K-12 that are already doing the work in those areas, you know, kind of like what Hope said about touching back with wellness, but also looping in our equity committee, like looping in people who are focused on these areas, because across the board, even once we get past the pandemic, we're still going to need to work on those things all the time, and we're going to want to make sure that whatever our K-12 plan is just supports that in a good way. And then I guess my question is, and again, I know we're really reluctant about FTEs with this money because we don't want to create permanent problems in the budget that we can't pay. But I do agree, I've heard a lot from people all the way from elementary up through high school who are concerned about math, to a lesser extent also about reading. You know we've heard from the lower K-1-2 teachers about some needs around potential teaching assistants to deal with just social, emotional, behavioral learning readiness for the kids that haven't had preschool. And I would like to be really targeted about what are the opportunities to think about just a 1-year, 2-year, part-time, temporary, what's the shot in the arm that we need in targeted places to give support where it's most needed to make up for the things that students really haven't had. And just to give teachers a little bit of support. I mean, we're hearing from some teachers that are just like, I've got so many kids with so many astronomically bigger needs than I've had before. And I hope it'll be better once I see 2 years down the line that they've gone to preschool, but right now that's just not the case. So I guess I would like us to think in some way about targeted FTEs or part-time jobs or assistants or however we're couching them that are contracts that are only a year or two where we need them.
Good point. Okay, Margot, did I see you?
I think Carrie had her
Carrie's
hand up first.
Okay, sorry, Carrie.
Please.
I cut you off. And you
Please.
went the
other way.
Sorry.
Jeez. No, I think I'm very much a program project person, and I'll clarify this by saying first, I'm never gonna invent new programs. That's not my job as a new, but I have a dream after reading all of this, and I think it complements what Lisa has said. Lisa and Hope have just said, but if we try to address each one of the themes, like I've been going through and theming all this feedback, I mean, it would never be a comprehensive strategy. So yes, we could say kindergarten paras, we need those, we need this, we need that. And so I think one thing that I would encourage us to do is look at a big thing. I think my recent experience with after school programming has led me to say one of those pathways is a huge investment in an enrichment focused after school program for the district that we could fund short term through these funds that would have communication with teachers so that a teacher can refer and say, Margot's really struggling on this subject, and that there is a tutor within that program. So my daughter has gotten the opportunity to be in an enrichment-based after-school program for 3 weeks, and it's night and day for us. And only New Franklin School qualifies and has that because of their designation. And so I think that there is, in talking to other parents that have participated, there's the same sort of reception and appreciation of this program. So I think too, where we already have it built in within the district, modeling after that, not reinventing the wheel, where there's rec collaboration, things like that. So I guess it just is sort of like a referral system, right? But there needs to be an umbrella that referral system happens under. And I think that was sort of my vision after reading through all these. We can't do 40 different things. We have to do 3 different things and cover, 30 domains under one. And that's my idea for how.
Well, thank you, Carrie. Margot.
Yep, we are science people. We think similarly. I was thinking, I feel like we keep talking about this and I want us to move forward. So I called a bunch of different school boards that I know people on, and it sounds like what a lot of other school boards are doing is identifying the themes or the buckets, and then to what Hope is saying, putting together a comprehensive task force of various, because though I like the feedback, I want to be honest that it was only about, between the 2 surveys, maybe 200 people. So we really haven't heard all that we need to hear, and I'm sure there are other ideas out there that we haven't thought about. So I would advise that we use this time to identify, in order of priority, the umbrellas, and then put comprehensive task force together that have levels and parents and community members, and they come up with, in a priority list, what are the things we need to address in this area, and what are the ideas for how we can address it, so that we can have an action plan moving forward. And they would prioritize those. They might have 10 wishes and we can only meet 5, but I feel like we need to involve more brains in solving the puzzle. Once we as a group identify from the feedback we've had so far, what are those big umbrella themes, which I think we have enough information to determine that. And then I would add to that, one of the things I heard a lot in talking to a lot of different teachers is what it sounds like the need is feet on the ground right now, and that they don't necessarily see that becoming a full-time position, that if we do it right and thoughtfully, if the intervention is in here and we also think about the curriculum and how that's going to come in, the two should line up to the point that we don't need to absorb that as a full-time position. We can go forward and not, in an ideal world, not have it be a major hit to the budget. But I do think that is something that we can be thinking about, is we can come at it as the short term, but then what's the greater overarching curricular needs, or our SEL curricular needs that will then continue and rise it forward and support it. So I'd love for us to identify those themes tonight.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yes, then we have to move on.
I really appreciate you putting together the surveys, but even in putting out our own surveys with the search committee, one of the things that I found is that often our PHA families from Portsmouth Housing don't get connected to these, or our resettlement families don't get connected with these surveys and their feedback. So I just want to make sure that we are being thoughtful to make sure that we're looking at what are the wraparound services that our resettlement families, I mean, I know the number is small, it's relative, right, for Portsmouth, it's not like we're Chicago, but we are seeing an uptick in resettlement families and those wraparound services and needs, and coming into the elementary school level classes, as well as our PHA families do need some holding hands sometimes of understanding how to get the feedback for their families. So I just want to make sure that we're catching that information somehow, Steve.
Hey, Nancy, Ann's had her hand up for
Oh, I'm sorry,
long
Ann,
time
I
over
didn't
here.
see your hand up. Go ahead.
Sorry, I make a better way.
I know. Blocking you.
I just wanted to mention the fact that some of the concerns that we've had, and we're hearing from parents and everyone in the surveys about wanting more assistance and more paras. We started the year minus 15 paras, that is my recollection of the number. And we're trying to hire them all year, and they were not available because people were not looking for work. I'm thinking that we may have more luck with professional people, unless they're weary as well. So that's a concern. It may be all well and good that we'd like to have paras or assistants and people on the ground, but they may well not be available. Yeah.
Okay, we'll have one more comment, and then we'll talk about how we're going to move forward.
So I guess with that being said, I just want to give 3 points. So first off, first off, you know, I just want to give a little pushback as far as making a committee to sort of direct this. When we initially were talking about budget, we had a list of stuff that we didn't put in the budget that we were going to consider ESSER funds for. And with that being said, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. There are communities that are doing it right now. Bigger cities are seeing success with putting more social workers into the school, having parent liaisons, so somebody that would work, and I know we've talked about this, having somebody that would work more between the school and the homes, sort of an intermediary to help with kids that are struggling with homework and whatnot. So I think, and as far as an overarching theme, I guess my concern is that, you know, with ESSER we need to address everybody, and I think everybody is feeling a level of burnout because, you know, at my job we're short-staffed, at your job they're short-staffed, you know, everybody's short-staffed, and so everybody's sort of, I don't know how, I can't speak for everybody, but I think a lot of people are working overtime right now, and, you know, prices are going up, and so there's a level of burnout, and so I just wonder if there's a way that we could address the burnout, because I don't see it. You know, I hope everybody has a refreshing summer and everything's great next year, but I am concerned that next year is going to be another level of burnout. And so, you know, I think we already have a list of priorities. We know what's sort of working in other communities, and, you know, if we can address the burnout, you know, that would be great. Also, I see universal pre-K on there, and I support that. So. But I know we've already talked about that, and we are increasing there. So I would hesitate the board to sort of go into this big brainstorming and actually kind of come back to what didn't make it in the budget, what was on our sheet from before as far as ideas for ESSER, and kind of narrow in those priorities and start spending this money towards those things immediately if we feel like we need more social workers that didn't make it into the budget.
Okay, Thank you, Liz. Carrie, briefly, can you
Real
make it
quick,
brief?
I was just curious if we've connected with the CTE, like early childhood ed folks, and Great Bay, and if there's, where we have had trouble hiring paras, and there's clearly a gap with kindergarten, or is it in, if we have used outside community resources. I tried to be quick, and then I was slow, Nancy. The pressure just got to me.
Yeah, I mean, we have pursued certainly, limited availability. It's hard to pull, I mean, in the case of CTE, from one program to cover a need that's all day.
Right.
It's just, it sort of.
2 hours don't help, kind of thing.
Degrades the integrity of the program to a degree, so. But I do think, and then again, we'll come up with a hire for you for a social worker coming up. The point made, which is incredibly valid, is we can have, in fact, we've had money in the budget this year that we haven't spent because we haven't been able to hire paras. So we have said, okay, well, let's try to get a social worker, and it took us almost all year to get a social worker. So I mean, I do think there are some real constraints. So we think differently around how do we partner with Seacoast Mental Health and bring people in to our schools on a more regular basis to help support. And those are the things I think that we have to keep talking about to get further. I guess one of the things in terms of use of ESSER funds, I guess I would think about in our timeline is we are just about to enter into the city council phase of our operating budget, and those of you who've been around this process a couple times, things can change there. We certainly are optimistic that our budget will stand through the process, but this is a unique opportunity, having ESSER funds, to at least maintain the budget you proposed, because if something were to have to be reduced, we could turn to ESSER and say, could we do it there? So I guess I want to say again, these aren't decisions we need to make tonight, that this is something that we just want to put together a process that's going to make sense and be the most effective.
So does it make sense to ask Nathan and you and George to come back with a plan, for, say at our next meeting, about how we're going to spend at least till the 9/23 deadline, the 1.2 million?
Well,
do you want to at least make suggestions?
We already have a sheet, though, don't we?
I was going to say, to Liz's point, we certainly can revise that based on where we are with the feedback we've got.
Yeah, Nathan said he was going to put together a graph, so can you put the buckets, because if you're going to be putting that together, you're going to come up with the buckets anyway, right? So can you put together the bucket? I mean, and we should be reminded that we don't need to front load all the spending at one place. We have a lot of transitioning happening in our district as well.
Okay, but I guess I would say if we could do that so that for money we could spend this summer on summer activities and, summer school and the busing we might need. I mean, whatever we would need to try to get some of these funds to happen now. And I know we do have some that we're already spending, but whatever we could do to increase, particularly for the summer, where that's so immediate.
I'd go back to the comments that I've made to you before, and I guess I would say this, as I walk through your financial report, and I say, looks pretty good, I think things are okay. One of the things I've said as well is, for instance, we have had a math tutor at the middle school this year. We put it in the budget for next year. It's itemized right now as something that could reasonably be paid for out of ESSER. I don't think you're going to have to, because there certainly have been a couple of para positions vacant that the dollars will cover that tutor cost.
Yep.
And so I continue to pursue that same logic, that things that are already done that we've thrown out there as possible, to the extent possible, those dollars will find a home in the operating budget this year because of the things that we've not been able to do, or positions we're not able to hire, et cetera.
But that's why I go back to being more intentional in our planning, because yes, we have that one position, but given where we might want those numbers to be, if we speak to the principals, the math departments, the people that are on the ground, boots, doing the work, I would think that bringing in more support on a temporary basis would be better than just one person to really be able to boost those numbers ongoing. I don't know that for sure, but is that wrong?
We have a schedule for summer and fall then? Could you come back to us with ideas for the summer and the fall using the ESSER funds? and then we can discuss that at our next meeting. Does that sound like a good plan to everybody?
Yeah, could I ask one other thing in that, if it's possible? I know we had with the original budget conversation, this sort of laundry list, like Liz was mentioning, of possible ESSER fund usage. It would be helpful to know, for example, if we're gonna budget, you know, some amount of money for wellness, if there are next steps, even if we don't get through all those steps, but whether we would send that to Chris Burke, or whether it would go to the wellness committee, or just what your thoughts are about how we start to move forward with identifying what the things are that we would actually do beyond just doing wellness. Does that make sense? Because I feel like for my brain, it's been a little too abstract, and I'm just trying to understand as we move through the process, who are we going to refine the ideas and come up with the things that we most need to spend the money on soonest? Does that make sense?
So it seems if we categorize the buckets, then those can get prioritized, and I think Steve
Yeah.
and George would be able to put alongside of that who would be the best people, right?
Yes, that's what I was saying.
I just want to understand.
Okay.
I guess, can we
Go
do
ahead, Liz.
requests?
Let's try to
Can
wrap
we
this
do
up.
like requests for proposals from teachers? Because I mean, if
Yeah.
we're looking for like wellness people to sort of, you know, the wellness folks to come forward and say, hey, how do you think this would be best presented? I mean, obviously, we're not looking for teachers to say, I need new Chromebooks. I mean, maybe we are. I'd like an iPad for my classroom or something like that. But like, I guess I'm wondering, I think the teachers and the admin are probably best suited to tell us, I mean, like they did when they were coming here saying what they needed, you know, maybe best suited to have ideas of, okay, well, I got what I wanted in the budget, but maybe this would be a little bit nicer, I could address this. I don't know if you could actually speak to any of that as far as from a teacher standpoint or admin standpoint, or
Yeah.
what, you
So
know.
yeah, I definitely would identify with that, being in the classroom, being in the fabric of what's going on. We kind of have a pulse on what might be most useful, and that makes a lot of sense. But didn't teachers have a say in the survey?
Yeah, we got a number of staff responses in the survey itself.
So like, I mean, right off the top of my head, I always do the Opportunity Fund camp. So last year, we used funds for that. Then there's other, I'm sure, disciplines, world languages and other places where they might have things that they want to use that as resources as well. There's Clipper Academy, where some of the funds could go.
Or summer.
Yeah, there was a suggestion in there that some of the ESSER funds be used for the Clipper Academy
Yeah.
applications that didn't get funded.
So
Arts
Steve,
I want
programs.
to end this conversation. I think we'll end it with asking Nathan and Steve to come back to our next meeting with what their suggestions are for spending the money for the summer and the fall to get us started. And I know in that one sheet, we had actual figures. There were actual salary figures and material figures and all that. Is that doable, would you say?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yes, Hope.
Steve, for our actual budget, aside from ESSER, teachers already have to put in proposals, right, that go up to the principal. And so I'm just wondering, there's always things on the list that make it through, and there's many things on the list, as we've learned, that don't make it through. So I'm just wondering, can we get an account of what hasn't made it through that might be something that could be a priority that could be looked at here, or is that something you feel like you already have a pulse on?
Yeah, I mean, we can go back to the building administrators and see what was, I mean, we had many of those conversations through our budget process when we met through December, so, but I guess I'd hope that we would do something a little more strategic and holistic in terms of what I think what Carrie maybe said, pick
Yes.
the 2 or 3 things.
Yes.
Because if you just put it out to
Right.
200-plus staff and say, what do you want, you're going to get as disparate as.
Right, I'm not suggesting that. I just was wondering if there's things that
Right.
might align with what comes up to be, like, these are the top themes that we see. And then if we prioritize them, we could also kind of look at if there's requests sitting there that's aligning with the top 3 things that we choose, that might be a time to look at those requests when we couldn't honor them in the regular budget.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I think we have a plan. So at our next meeting, we'll talk about this some more. Okay. Now we'll move on. The next item on the agenda is the consideration and approval of our superintendent contract. And do we have a motion, first of all, and then we'll go into discussion?
So moved.
Hope and Margot. Anyone want to discuss this? We all have it in our packet this time, thank goodness.
Nice job, Nancy.
Thank you. No questions?
I mean, should we, I'll just make public comment that I'm an attorney, so I've looked at the contract. We've also heard from counsel, and counsel compared contract with prior superintendent contract. I think it's, comparable to what other superintendents are seeing within the state, and reasonable and fair. As far as, I think we were better suited to comment on this last time, so I guess maybe I should pull up my notes from the last meeting just to sort of put on record where any sort of points.
Anyone
Are
else?
we voting on this?
Yeah, we're voting on it tonight.
Yeah, so I guess, so I guess I would just, I just sort of summarize. I guess I just want to say that, it seems like the superintendent, is incentivized to come live here, although it's not a requirement. I think essentially it's fair, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer, questions directly from the community about the contract.
And I know you talked to counsel. Tom
Yes, we
Clausen.
talked to Tom Clausen and understood, how this contract compared to prior contracts, so I'd be happy to answer questions privately if anybody had a question.
Thank you, Liz. Any other comments? Okay, well, I think we're very fortunate to have Dr. McLaughlin joining us, and I think it's a fair contract. It's been hammered out quite efficiently, I think. So, do we have to have a roll call on this?
I don't think you need.
No? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. And we're happy that Dr. McLaughlin will be working with Dr.
Yeah,
Zadravec.
we met last week via Zoom, and, he's looking forward to coming, and I'm looking forward to working with him much more closely. So.
And so is it Nathan.
Just excited so I can get him to work. Get him an email account and get going.
The next item on the agenda is the consideration and approval for employment with a social worker at the middle school. And I'll hand it over to Steve.
Yes, so we have for you, as I just referenced a few minutes ago, a long-awaited ability to nominate a social worker. Lisa Jacobus is our candidate for a social worker, primarily focused at the middle school, although one of the ideas in this position is to start to think of case managing some of our most needy families, et cetera, that may have students across multiple schools, in fact. And so Lisa comes to us with a master's in social work from Smith College, bachelor's in social work from UNH, and many years of experience in the field, and certainly rose to the top for the middle school in their search process. So we're very excited to nominate Lisa.
I move to approve.
Second.
I have a question.
With the parade.
Okay, what is your question?
So Steve, can you give a little bit of background of like exactly what the position's going to look like? Is it going to be mainly case management or working directly with students?
Both.
Middle school.
Yeah, it'll be both. I mean, it'll be the nature of social work, as you know, which is deep work with families around the needs and access, and certainly students who may be in acute stages of needing some extra support.
Can you help me understand, just with her background, and I know that we've been searching, I'm not trying to, I'm excited that we have a candidate coming forward, but I'd like to understand if she's going to be working with middle school, her background is mainly in mental health training and clinical assessments, and not necessarily working with youth clinical therapy is my understanding, so.
If you go back through the nomination, she has other experience, other than a more recent experience of working with youth in a mental health capacity. But yeah, so one of the.
I see that, but it's very light in comparison to her main.
And honestly,
so I'm just trying to understand, is her role going to be more on the case management side, or?
Well, I mean, it's all working with students, and then, one of the things she said to us in our interview was that was one of the things that drew her to this position, was being able to get back to work much more closely directly with students.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Do we don't need a roll call vote, do we? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Steve, you're still on.
All right, so yes, we have 2 requests for leave of absence. One from Britt Santamaria, a teacher at Little Harbor, and the other from Kim Vargo, one of our math teachers at the high school, both for family or maternity reasons.
Motion to approve both.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any discussion first?
I have discussion, I'm so sorry.
do? Okay, go ahead.
I certainly approve both of these and can see the need for them, but I also have concern around, we continue to have leave of absences come up at such a time where we're in dire need of staff. And so I'm just wondering how is there a cap that we're going to have? I know we try to always, we're a family here, we're trying to honor our staff and we're trying to give them what they need, but how many of these can we absorb, I guess, before, I mean, people are already running around and subbing in classrooms and trying to do their full-time jobs too, so I just am wondering, what's the game plan for absorbing continued leaves?
Yeah, so we are fortunate to get notices of positions out. We have not even last year had great difficulty in filling the 1-year positions, with the one exception of our business program. And so we would have high confidence that we'll be able to fill these with teachers for the year.
Okay, great, thank you.
Liz.
And I just would add to Hope, I mean, I asked this question last time or the time before to Steve of what's going on with these sort of things, and I think the idea is that we're actually giving space for somebody to come back to us instead of saying, hey, no, we're not going to do that, you know, go your separate way. We're providing space for them, you know, so we may bring somebody in and then be able to shift them around. So if we did bring somebody in to cover one of these, we could shift them to another classroom or vice versa. So I think it just creates more space. I mean, it creates space, essentially. Doing something like this versus somebody leaving creates space to continue to build our staff.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting anyone should leave.
No, I
just-
understand that, but I guess that was
We are in staff shortage and hiring
the sticking
shortages.
point for me, I guess, when I was before.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Consideration and approval of teacher contracts.
Yeah, so I had sent you our list of nominations for professional staff for next year for teachers, and this is the time of year, the meeting we typically would nominate for your approval. The staff, so we would ask for your approval of the nomination list as presented. You know, I know George gave an update on the principal search committee for the high school when we did the survey to ask what the strengths were of PHS. Resoundingly, probably one of the top vote getters, if you will, was the quality of staff. And I think if we were to do that survey across all of our schools, I'm sure that would be the answer we'd get from this community. So I nominate that slate of teachers with a lot of respect and thankfulness for the job they do every day. They certainly have earned the admiration of the community. So.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion?
I guess this is just an interesting practice to me as a new board member. And so is this sort of it seems to be a traditional thing where we get a slate of everybody. And so I guess I just, it's just it's not odd, but it's just new to me. And I guess this is an interesting way to sort of put things forward, because we're obviously approving the budget for these positions. So really, what are we, like, where would our role really come into play if we were looking at this? Like, hey, I want this person gone this year. Like, I don't think that's going to go that way. So, like, what's the purpose of us continually doing this?
Honestly,
I guess.
Liz, as you already said, you know, it's our job to nominate staff,
Yeah.
and it's the board's job to approve. So, yeah, absent saying no, we won't approve them, and now go find somebody else to nominate, and that's probably the extent of it.
Okay. Anybody we want to get rid of?
The whole staff.
Just kidding. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, committee updates. Did anybody go to a committee meeting? There was,
I
yes,
did
Bev.
go to the CTE committee meeting, but I did not bring my notes with me tonight, so I'd rather wait and report on that at next meeting if I could, so that I get it right.
Probably a lot.
Do that.
It was a great meeting. It was really good.
Anyone else?
I also went to the Library Board of Trustees, and there really isn't anything terribly new, except they're hearing a lot of pushback about the fact that people have to wear masks. We all wore masks at our meeting. And I was wondering whether they had a loss of materials because they don't have fines anymore. And they said, no, not really, but if something is just missing, then they have a restock fee, and no problem.
And they have a new director of the library.
A new director, yeah, she was the assistant director before, and they're looking now to name an assistant director.
Our library is something we should all be very proud of. There's so many wonderful
Beautiful.
programs at our library. I attended the SAU 50 and 52 meeting with Steve and George, and we met Tally there. It was a good meeting. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
I think that we have all the same concerns that y'all have, and are trying to do all the things that you guys are doing in terms of supporting students, using ESSER funds, lots of transitions in both SAUs, and how do we continue to collaborate well and efficiently. And I think that's it, right, Nancy?
Tally, what is your role? I guess I know you're the representative, but are you on a board in one of the towns, or are you like how did you come about being the representative?
I'm the vice chair of the Greenland School Board.
Okay.
And so that's how I do that. And professionally, I'm a 21-year educator myself. So.
Okay.
Yes, that's how I came to this party.
Nice to meet you.
So mine's not a committee update, but I want to give a shout out to the hockey team who made it to the finals, which is a big deal. I went to the game. It was an awesome game. They gave up a great fight. And so I just want to say that, I'm really proud of our hockey team.
And I don't know if anyone saw the Herald today, but there's a story about the high school students that have gotten scholarships at various colleges throughout the country for sports accomplishments. And I think most of them were Portsmouth high school students, so that was kind of a cool thing to see.
While we're giving just props, I want to say thanks to our very conscientious student representative on this board, Nick. Was extremely conflicted. He reached out yesterday about coming to the meeting tonight or getting an early bedtime to be good for the SAT tomorrow. And I excused him from tonight's meeting. So good luck tomorrow, Nick. I just want to say. He is on our principal search committee, though. So.
Oh, good.
Nancy?
Yes.
I just wanted to update on the education part of the Portsmouth 400, and the students will be conducting their first interview, their historical interview, on Friday. And they have put out a request to students to conduct more interviews. So this is their dry run practice one.
Is this Harold Whitehouse?
It is.
Yes.
Yeah. I think they did it last Friday.
No, it's this Friday. I talked to Jillian today.
I don't know if people know Harold, but quickly, he's 94. He's been a city councilor, a school board member. I think he's been in the State House. I mean, he's lived in Portsmouth his whole life. So he's a good person to interview. Funny guy, too.
Yeah.
Great personality.
About 40 to 50 kids today made blue and yellow peace cranes, so we'll be adding to, I don't know if you remember the peace wall we made in 2016. We're going to be adding to that Ukrainian, not the flag, we're going to do like yellow with a blue peace sign, but we're making it mobile so that it can travel to different locations, maybe different schools, but that should be done maybe next week sometime. So that was really great. A lot of students showed up. We actually ran out of origami paper, so.
Oh, isn't that awesome?
Yeah, it was great. It was really great. And students were teaching like how to do the peace cranes, because about 50% just came because they wanted to, to help, but they didn't know how to fold them. And I don't know, have you folded peace cranes? It's actually not that easy.
It's really
so anyway, so it was great. It was really good.
Well, thank you.
Too big for that.
Kim, oh, you can do it. We'll get you big paper.
Kim, can you give an update on Equity Council? And I just
Yes,
also
I was
wanted to
gonna
give
do that,
props to We Speak for doing the middle school training.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, yesterday, finally, after almost a year of dreaming and planning, We worked with New Hampshire Listens, but more importantly, we actually worked with UNH students and the Portsmouth students and the middle school students to do a social justice training. And we're going back next Monday to do the same thing, and we'll probably have to go back a third time because we want to help them with their mission and like how they see themselves in their community. But it was great. It was super to have our high schoolers work with the UNH students. Connor, he's a senior. So that worked out really well. And then, yes, Equity Council has been going strong. We had 2 meetings like in a week. We had one on a Wednesday, and then one on a Tuesday, like the next week. But we've been moving ahead pretty good. It's slow and steady wins the race in terms of what we've put down for goals. One of the events was a student-led dialogue to help express like what students are interested in, so that was pretty eye-opening. And then the next week we took different statements and kind of organized them, like how we would see them play out in the district. So it was very good. So we're moving in a good direction.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, sorry.
Kim, anything else from the high school that you'd like to report? No?
No, but I do understand about the library because we have an event there Thursday night, and they only take 30 people in the Levinson room right now, and they have to wear masks. So it's going to be, we've had to move to Zoom for part of it. So I do understand, though, how people are like, a little frustrated.
Any other committee reports? Okay, the next item is follow-up items. I have not heard anything from Kelly Barnaby regarding the public meetings during the religious holidays. Have you? She's our city clerk, and she's the one that's been put in charge of this. So I'll give her a call, find out more information about that. Okay. The communication regarding PHS course level.
Yeah, they had their open house last week, and of course, all of the clarifications, I believe, at this point have been made through what course levels are available as students transition from 8th to 9th grade. I have not heard of any questions or issues since we last spoke.
Okay. Does anyone have a future agenda item? Margot?
Yeah, in light of there was an email correspondence in our packet tonight, and we heard from parents, and I think back to the time I've been on the board and some of the changes we've made, like you can't take away recess at elementary school. I would really like to have a conversation about what is the district philosophy on discipline, and are we moving in the direction of reparative or punitive? Are our practices building and aligning in the right way? Because I know we have policies, but then at each building we have practices. And I don't think, it doesn't feel to me like it's all under the same philosophy. And I think it's time to ask the question, particularly in what we've learned with where our kids are coming out of COVID and their mental health needs. Are we a district that is in support of reparative discipline and punishment? What does that look like at each level, and how are we working towards it? I get that it can't change overnight, but I think the dialogue has to happen on the direction that we're moving in, where our kids are now, what we're seeing. I mean, we've heard all year we're seeing more behavior challenges, but how are we responding to that in a way that's building community, strengthening the tool belt of the children, and hopefully getting them out of a path of future discipline? I would love to see that as an agenda item.
Is that an agenda item you want for a normal board meeting or for a retreat item as we're looking at our goals and strategic planning moving forward?
I was going to say strategic planning. That's probably something that could happen in our strategic planning.
Totally. However, in order to have it as a strategic plan, it would be really important to get feedback from the principals on how it's being, because it's very, even at the 3 elementary schools, it's very different how the same behavior is responded to. And then everybody goes to the middle school and it's a totally different process there. And then you go to the high school. So I guess I think we need to hear what's how discipline is being treated in each area so that we can then ask the question of where does it align, where does it diverge, and is there a need for a philosophy and a change moving forward? But so I don't know, I mean, obviously can't get every principal to present, but it has come up repeatedly on it, and it is a concern, and, you know, I guess I'm not formally clarifying it, but.
Let's hear from Pip and Lisa first.
I just wanted to say that I share your concern deeply, and I feel strongly that it should be something that we discuss here, and I like the idea of having a presentation on what are the current practices, because I agree with you, the practices seem to deviate from the policies sometimes, and they are different at different buildings. And then I like your idea of working on it at a retreat, because I do think it's a pretty big conversation to have, but it is somewhere where we need to establish a district philosophy and or update the one that we have. Because as was pointed out today, some of our policies may be out of date on this, and the policies should align with the practices.
Lisa, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to echo that, and I also would like to see if it's possible either to get it from the principals, or maybe this is something that Steve and George can get data and just email. But I would love to have some sort of quantitative information about sort of from K-12 level, you know, how many kids are being disciplined, like what are the things that they're most often being disciplined for? I mean, I'm sure we're not doing a lot of suspensions in elementary, but I'd like to understand sort of who is being punished, how are they being punished, and what for. Like, I don't know how to sort of like prejudge what that question is exactly without knowing. And as far as, you know, our missions around equity, I'd also like to understand, like, are those, you know, who are those kids sort of demographically to the extent we know that? You know, if we're targeting students with disabilities or students of color or any other
Unintentionally targeting.
Okay, fair, but
let's just put that on the record. I don't think the school district.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to say that.
Yeah.
Well, how do you want to move forward with this? Should we have a work session about it? Should we have a retreat about it? Shall we? I mean, the policy committee now is going to examine that policy that the parents were concerned about. I have some definite strong opinions about that based on my 22 years of experience. So I would like to go to that policy committee meeting. I intend to be there. So I don't know how we want to, do we want to,
I think we want to hear from the principals. We want to get some data.
well, it's just the elementary school principals, correct?
K-12. We want to hear.
But the policy at the middle school and the high school is
Well,
we're
we're
one
asking
school.
a bigger question than that one policy. Like, we're asking big picture, what is our goal when we tell a student they did something wrong and we need to intervene?
Can I propose something?
So I think we want
Wait
to
a
hear
minute.
from the principals of all the schools. And, you know, maybe that's not all at the same meeting, maybe it's not at a meeting, maybe they fill out a Google form and we read a survey, although people are sick of surveys. Like, I don't want to waste people's time, but I think we want to know what they're doing, any numbers around what they're doing.
But we
And
have
then-
policies that tell them what they can do.
No, that's what we're saying, Nancy.
If
The
the policies
don't tell them.
aren't being
So,
enforced.
We're asking,
Let Steve talk here.
Nancy, we're asking for a separate
Let's-
agenda item than that policy. We're asking for a bigger picture discussion around what is our goal for discipline. That policy is just about alcohol and drugs.
Can I give a
It's not about
Wait a minute, wait,
everything.
okay.
So I'd
Let
like
Steve
to
talk
just
here.
So in whatever way we form it, I mean, it sounds to me like you could really benefit from hearing from building principals, those who are involved in the disciplinary practices in their building. At the elementary school, that's primarily the principal. Middle and high school is primarily the assistant principals. But then also to make sure you have a good understanding of the process, because based on just the tone of the conversation so far, the data points you might be hearing from might be particular parents who are upset with a particular thing that happened in a particular school. And I can tell you there's a lot more restorative mindset, particularly at the elementary level, and how we work with students than punishing and being punitive. So I think it would really benefit you to have that presentation, understand. Just start with where we are.
Give us that.
Right,
that
and
summary
then,
to
and
begin
then we can, but I do think that would feed into, you know, a lens through your policies, because if we want to be more aggressive around restorative practices, then that might even mean more, as I referenced in the athletic policy, that was the big change last time, is we actually inserted a lot more restorative options for students than the previous policy had. So I think it's a worthy conversation, but probably should start with, you know, just making a common understanding of what's happening.
Can you arrange for that?
Yeah, George
Do you
and I
want-
will be glad to rally the elementary principals.
Do you want to make
They're
it
gonna love it.
a work session or an agenda item, or what do you think?
I think it's gonna, it should take a chunk of time, no doubt. You know, at least a work session in
Okay.
a meeting that we would have.
And in that, Steve, we would be able to have an understanding of how policies translate procedurally into each building is essentially what I hear people saying. And that might look different of like, these are the stages at the high school level.
Can you
these are
keep
the
it brief?
stages.
It's 9:45.
Yeah, I just wanna say-
I don't want to beat a dead horse.
Yeah, I guess I
Decided to
just
have a
want to
work
say
session.
I've done a lot of work in this area because of my experience with NHLA, and you know, I've gone into the delinquency statutes, and our delinquency statutes in New Hampshire talk about therapeutic versus punitive.
Well, that's
and so
what you just said.
So
That's what Steve
yeah,
just
so
said.
what I would suggest as far as a proposal would be that the board adopt on our next agenda, we discuss adopting and coming up with a philosophy that we want to take as a board in our school system, also take a therapeutic instead of a punitive approach. Not saying that we don't already do that, but I think it's been really hard to transition. We still have prosecutors that are trying to prosecute kids like criminal cases. So I think if we as a board, you know, I think we could take an adoption. And there are, New Hampshire Legal Assistants did a bunch of, they did a study about, before COVID, about youth and disciplining in schools and whatnot. So I think there is data and data sets out there. So I'd propose that. And then second, real quick, we have this sheet that says future agenda items, and today it says elementary school principals. I guess I'm wondering, you know, obviously Mr. Cirillo was here tonight. I don't see him. I don't know where he fell. So I guess I'm just wondering where we're at with this calendar of people coming in. And so maybe, you know, maybe we start with elementary school principals and we talk to them about, you know, disciplining outside. And then we talk to PMSs coming in the next time or something. So, you know, maybe there's a space for spreading this out a little bit, but maybe we, as a board, on our agenda, adopt a policy or adopt a philosophy, overarching philosophy, that we want to be therapeutic instead of punitive.
I think we can let Steve and George work with the
Yeah.
administrators at each building to figure out what's the most convenient and efficient way to have the conversation with them.
I
And
agree.
then go from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I actually don't know that I want to see elementary, middle, like, I don't even want to, like, I think even convening a conversation and bringing kind of a report back might be the best strategy, because I don't want to overstep my role as a board member and be like, well, why did you do this and why did you do that? And so I think having that buffer of feedback being brought back to the group might be a better.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have Steve and George bring us back a report for the next meeting.
Yeah, why don't we meet with the administrators, talk about what just the best, because I think we can clearly understand the issue that we need to get to and involve them in what's the best way to do it. If, you know, if it's a group of them coming, or if it's just getting information back to you. I'd want to make sure you can get the best information you
Right.
need. And if after a presentation, questions are going to come up that are specific to a certain situation, it may be helpful to have people there that can respond to it. But
Yeah.
I also respect that, you know, there's a certain, there are a lot of, different pieces to this too.
So again, I would.
Wait, raise your hand, please. Yes, Hope.
I would suggest that maybe we just collect information and revisit this at a retreat. It seems to me it's a deeper conversation around our goals and our priorities as a district as a whole. Just
Thank you. Okay.
Are we ever going to get back to this calendar? I just wanted to sort of follow up with
I would just say we did make an adjustment because elementary had just come in for budget and we didn't.
Oh, okay.
And we typically don't bring them in for budget. And since you just saw them and there had been requests to see performing arts.
Okay.
We made that swap and I guess it hasn't been updated on there. So sorry.
Okay, so we're still looking at PMS report and world language next time, possibly, or do we know?
Well, now that we've added the agenda items discussion in each board meeting, I think that's going to become a fluid document.
Okay.
Liz, because we may prioritize different discussions as things come up.
Okay.
Okay, are there any upcoming events you want to tell us about, or?
Upcoming events, SAT tomorrow.
SAT
There you go.
tomorrow.
George will be at the
in
high school all day tomorrow doing
I'm-
testing, so.
I'm
he's
serving the
excited
snacks
about
up, and for juniors, and in-service day Friday, a lot of training going on across the district on Friday, pretty intense day. So,
It's an off day for kids.
right, no kids
Just
in
remind
school
people.
on
On day
Friday.
for parents.
High school kids, yeah, tomorrow, we want you.
Right.
Send them all to kindergarten.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Hope. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me.